Good afternoon. Welcome to the Moore County Board of Education work session for Monday, November 4th, 2019, and the year has flown by. Hard to believe it's November. Do I hear a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
First by Ms. Thompson, a second by Mr. Dennison. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Ms. Thompson.
Yes, may we all stand, please, for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. First item on our agenda, Dr. Grimacy, our strategic plan update.
Madam Chair, I'll invite Dr. Locklear and Dr. Powers and Ms. Dedman to join us. I'll offer no introduction for fear that I might be stepping on somebody else's toes or stealing their thunder.
Take my punchlines, that's just fine.
Prepared to do that, but I think you're prepared to do that as well, Dr. Locklear, and I'll
Yes,
defer
sir.
to you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Grimacy. Thank you for this opportunity for us to come. If you want to say our second installment of strategic plan progress update today. In October, we had the opportunity to give you an update on our strategic progress and our plan from our first domain of academic achievement. We talked a little about in October the historical perspective on our strategic plan, that during the 17-18 school year, the board engaged in a stakeholder community-driven process of revising our strategic plan as a district and really working on it being a strategic plan. One that's really focused on the work and is one that's simple and pragmatic. The board revised your mission, vision, core beliefs, and the strategic plan comprised of 5 domains: academic achievement, student safety, health, and welfare, employee culture and capacity, parent and community engagement, and organizational capacity and efficiency. We talked about our plan for bringing you progress updates of each of those domains. Had the opportunity to share our academic achievement progress update in October, looking at the strategic progress we've made, what are the key outcomes that we're looking at, monitoring and evaluating our progress, and then where do we know we're diving deeper? Where are our next steps as we continue to work on improving our school district? Today, Dr. Seth Powers, Director of Student Support Services, and Ms. Lucinda Dedman, Assistant Director of Student Support Services, they are going to take us through our progress update in our second domain of student safety, health, and welfare. And there's lots to celebrate there, but we also know there's lots of work that remains to be done. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Powers and let him take us through the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Locklear, and we are pleased to be with you today to be able to share our progress and where we hope to go from here to continue to improve around student safety, health, and welfare. And Dr. Locklear had discussed what our 5 areas of our strategic plan are, but we'll get right into domain 2, student safety, health, and welfare. And we have 3 objectives around this domain. Objective 1 focuses on creating positive school cultures, and that includes both physical safety and also security on our campuses. Objective 2 is related to equity and focuses specifically on reducing discipline disparities in our schools. And finally, objective 3 is related to health and wellness and is focused on both student mental health needs as well as physical health needs. So we're going to jump right in and start to talk about some of the significant progress that we've made in certain areas. First, we'll look at school culture. I think it's important to point out the significant progress that has been made over the last several years in terms of utilization of PBIS in our schools. We've had, all schools have been trained in Module 1 of PBIS, and many of our schools have also gone beyond that to be trained in Modules 2 and 3 as well. I'll remind you, in 2017-18, We had 13 green ribbon schools, 1 model school, and 1 exemplar school. And that was prior to the change that combined PBIS and MTSS recognitions into one category. This past year, in 2018-19, with the new requirements, we had 4 green ribbon schools, Southern Middle School, Southern Pines Elementary, Carthage Elementary, and West End Elementary. So we're very proud of them and expect that number to grow as we learn more about the expectations and meeting those requirements for getting that recognition based also on MTSS. Capturing kids' hearts is another area that we're very proud of the progress that we've made. Again, I'll remind you, this is a model for promoting connectedness to schools, and it's with a focus on adult behaviors. Southern Middle School was an initial full school pilot, and we now have 4 schools that have their staffs fully trained and are implementing Capturing Kids' Hearts. 3 of those schools were trained this year initially in the summer before school started. Those were McDeeds Creek Elementary, Elise Middle School, and Cranes Creek Middle School. Finally, for school culture, I'd like to highlight our social-emotional learning surveys as well as our climate and culture surveys. We're in the 2nd year of having district-wide surveys in these areas. And again, the focus of these surveys, not only on academics, but really the whole child. You know, what can we do to help meet all the needs that children have? SEL surveys are given in grades 3 through 12, and climate and culture surveys are given in grades 7, 9, and 11. And we'll be able to focus more on this data as we look at some of the key outcomes that I'll share shortly. When we look at safety and security, I want to highlight an additional SRO that we have that we gained last year through the state safety grants. We now have 13 SROs plus Chief Fry. Last year we were able to maintain 3 previous positions that we had through the state with those grants, plus add a position. We've also requested this year, we've just submitted safety grants again, and we've asked for an additional SRO position. We hope we'll have that. Campus emergency alert systems. Those are installed on a number of our campuses. They're being installed on the rest of those campuses. And basically that's an outside alarm that goes off through outside speakers to be loud and alert anyone in the event of an emergency situation. Active Defender is a school safety app that we're currently utilizing on all of our campuses by virtually all staff that allows staff members to initiate a lockdown or alert others of a crisis situation from anywhere on campus, and really reduces response times in the event of a crisis situation. And then finally, the Say Something anonymous reporting system. It's now required by the state that all districts have an anonymous reporting system that meets the criteria established by DPI. We're using the recommended program by the state, and we're currently in the process of bringing that online, and hopefully that will be done sometime in December. I'll now let Ms. Dedman share some progress that we've made in terms of mental and physical health and PD and training.
All right, we've also made some significant gains in our mental health and safety systems. So our 5-member BIT team, Behavioral Health Intervention Team, takes referrals for school-based therapy when community providers can't meet the needs of our students, and our behavior specialists help when behaviors can't be managed at the school level. We currently have 69 students on active caseloads throughout the district. They're either receiving therapy or intense behavioral support, which also involves training for teachers. And there are many others that are in small groups or in consultation, so they help a lot, even if they're not exactly on their caseload. We have standard protocols for suicide and threat assessments. The good news is that this time last year, we had completed 32 suicide assessments at this time last year, and this year we are down to just 19 so far this year. So we're very excited about that. We don't have a good system for tracking our threat assessment numbers, so I can't tell you that, but this time next year I'll be able to, because we'll have that system down. We're also working in collaboration with our community providers and trying to bring some of their providers into our schools so that we can expand the capacity of our mental health services. We do have one embedded substance abuse counselor at Northmore. She's there 1 day a week, and that's through Pinnacle Family Services is providing that. We're conducting the youth risk behavior surveys every year for 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. Our PD has included a team trained in youth mental health first aid at each school. 160 school staff have been trained in the Trauma-Informed Reconnect for Resilience workshop. We've applied for another safety grant this year, and hopefully we'll expand that and have another 160 staff trained. We also have 2 trainers now, and we've asked for funding to add 2 more trainers to that staff. So we'll have 4 people that will continue training every year. All secondary schools will be administering the SAMHSA-approved suicide prevention program, which is called Signs of Suicide. We have 3 that have already done it, and by the end of the first semester, they all will have done that, and that's raising awareness and training for staff and students and parents. Our student support services staff have all been trained in threat assessments, and our mental health providers have all been trained in a PREPARE workshop, which is a research-based protocol for responding and following through when critical incidents happen in our schools. All schools completed live functional safety exercises last year, and our school resource officers have been trained at Samarkand with the state simulation system. I don't know if you've heard about that, but that's really interesting. They have, they go onto a stage and they have a virtual reality where they practice any kind of number of different scenarios, including possible suicides, threats, or threat assessments with shooters. And they actually have 2 of their simulations are mapped as Northmore and Pinecrest High School. So when they're there practicing with their virtual reality, it looks like they're actually on their school campuses. So that's been very fascinating. Dr. Powers has been out there, but I have not yet been out there. All right.
So I have a couple of questions, Seth. With the 13 SROs, with the additional ones, can you tell me again where those are placed? I know at all the high schools and middle schools, and then we have a few at some of the elementary schools, maybe?
Correct. Yes, we have an SRO based on all secondary campuses.
Okay.
With the exception of Elise, which is our smallest middle school, and plus just
Right.
right down the road from Robbins Police Department. We do have a couple of SROs who are based to serve certain elementary schools. For example, the Southern Pines Elementary and Southern Pines Primary. The officer that we gained last year through the grant was placed specifically there. And I should add that the state SRO grants are specifically for elementary and middle school campuses. So when we gain these positions, we use them to help support the needs on elementary and middle school campuses, which is fine. That's where we need them. You know.
Right, right.
And the way it helps is that we, when there is a situation that requires an SRO on an elementary campus, we don't have to pull from the high school to go cover and then leave that campus more vulnerable.
And the grant, is that for a calendar year, fiscal year? How is the fund for that allocated?
They're for the fiscal year.
So just for one fiscal year, we receive dollars?
And the grants that we received last year actually did cover last year and this year. The safety grants were a little late coming out this year because of the situation with the budget with the state not being approved, but they have just come out. We just submitted. That would be for this 2019-20 school year. So, we're hopeful that we'll know soon because, we're 3 months into school. We'd like to move forward.
And the other question I have on the BIT team, most students are referred by the teachers. Do you have any self-student referrals to that program?
We don't. We have, the way the model works is that the Tier 3, which is the most intensive supports at the schools, are attempted first. And so then if that local team at the school can't manage it, can't find outside therapy, or can't manage the behavior, then they're the ones that submit the referral to the team.
And do you have, is there an opportunity for a parent referral if they know their child is?
They would go through the school, so
They
they
would
would
go through the
contact the
teacher.
counselor.
Okay.
Yeah, the counselor at the school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I just had a quick question about the signs of suicide assessment. Is that a teacher assessment or training, or is that for the student?
So it's a training for the teachers and the students and the parents. So it's a big undertaking. The counselors who are rolling it out have usually, when they've done it, they've called in for some little extra support on the campus on that day, and from the student support services. And so they train the teachers, and there's modules, there's videos. The format is a video. You watch the video, and then there's some guided questions. So the teachers go through a training, and then the teachers show the videos in the classroom, and then the teachers have the questions to walk the students through the training. And then there's a lot of resources on their website too that parents can access, and then we also send information home to parents. So far, all the schools are planning to do it that way through the teachers, through one class. At least because it is small, that counselor did decide to go and do all of his himself, so he went from class to class and did it.
May I follow up on Ms. Thompson's question about our SROs? So the grant-funded SROs, when this grant runs out at the end of the current school year, we either must come up with local funds to continue with this SRO, or we drop back in number?
In the past, the state has supported this. Before we reapplied for this grant last year, this had been something that the state had provided for 5 years previous and never asked for it to be renewed. I'm not sure. Last year they started an annual process again, which they should. But the plan is for what they give that it would continue to be supported. Now it is a 2-to-1 match, so for every $2 the state provides, if we were to receive the grant, we would have to provide $1 locally. Basically, they're giving us $33,333 for an SRO.
But if the grant doesn't continue, then
If it doesn't
it will be up to the
continue, we'll
local
figure out what
funding.
we're doing, and it could absolutely be that, if we don't have that, and, with the budget the way that it is, we might have to look at eliminating some SROs.
We would take a step backwards.
Correct.
I would like to put Ms. Cooper on the spot for a moment, too. I tried to make eye contact with her back there so she'd know I was going to ask this. So this is the second year of Capturing Hearts for Kids? Third year. But you were the pilot program. Can you tell us in just a few words what difference it's made?
Marcia, come up to
And perhaps Dr. Powers could have answered this question for you, but since you're here.
I will say this, while Marcy's coming up, I'll brag on her a little bit, because her school has done an outstanding job of using the model effectively in her schools, and recently they were invited to apply for national,
We've been named a probable school for a national showcase school with Capturing
to be a
Kids'
national,
Hearts.
which would mean other schools would come to Marcy's school to see how it works, because she's done such a great job with it, right?
So we're excited about it. It really puts an emphasis on intentional, strong, positive, appropriate relationships between teachers and students, but also between students and students. We've seen students be more intentional about their kindness, about asking each other about things in their lives that are going on. Through good news, you really learn a lot about your students, and they learn a lot about each other, and then trying to teach how to communicate and just forge those very strong relationships with everyone.
Well, I noticed it said it was almost retraining adults as well, which is, I know we focus so much on training the students to be nice to one another, but you're training your teachers to be
Right.
nice
We
as
follow
well.
the Excel model, and so it's engage, and the teachers greet students outside the classrooms, and they might have a student helper to do that, but the emphasis on that is really looking into a student to make sure they're okay and they don't need any help before coming into class. And then to explore, and that's that good news, and asking questions following the good news. Communicate is communicating your lesson. E would be empowering your students, and so we have social contracts that the students come up with, and they all agree that that's the way that we're gonna, act in the classroom and treat each other. And then there's a rater at the end of class that gives a rating on how this class did that day. And then there's a launch at the end that can be a quote, it can be something to leave on. So
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah, and really what you're doing there is you're building connectedness to the school. That's what you want. When research shows, when students feel connected to their school, they perform better academically. They're more involved with extracurricular activities and those things that we know help support positive outcomes. So when you not only focus on students, but you focus on adult behaviors, then you're doing those things that are going to help those kids to build those strong connections and want to be at school and be happy when they're at school. So,
Thank you.
I'd like to go back to the campus emergency alert systems. You said that some of the campuses were already equipped with that. When do we anticipate having all campuses?
I would hope within the next few months. We applied for one of our the safety equipment grant that we received through the state last year. That was, we applied for that specifically for these emergency alert systems on our campuses. So we received approximately $63,000 from that grant that we put toward those systems. It's been a little bit more of an undertaking to get them installed than what we originally anticipated. We thought that our technology department would be able to get most of that done, and we found that we can't do that. Well, we just reapplied for safety grant funds again, and it's going to take just a little bit more from these grant funds to finish it all up. But I would say, our plan is working with technology. I would hope in the next few months, maybe by the end of the semester in January.
On average, what's the cost of doing a campus?
It's about, I think it's about $2,500 to $3,000.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me ask another question with that one. So that means that someone at, say, Union Pines, who's out on the band who's out on the football field practicing their routine, would be able to hear a warning siren or
Correct, yes. So
notification.
depending on the size of the campus, would determine how many outside speakers are needed, and they're placed strategically. So when those in a lockdown situation, the system will be activated and allowed. Siren's going to go off along with actual verbal instructions. It will say lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. Secure yourself behind closed doors, and then it'll also say it in Spanish, and then it will repeat it and continue until the system is cleared. So. And this was actually something that came about because of the functional safety exercises that we held on each campus last year. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but it was a staff member at Union Pines High School who brought this up after our exercise. When on our high schools, our biggest campuses, when we asked the question, okay, was there anybody that did not hear, the lockdown called, and you see 10 hands go up because they're in different places, and we know that's a huge problem. If you don't know that the crisis is happening, how can you protect your students or yourself? So just through conversation that day with the Union Pine staff, we talked about this kind of thing, and it's not a package that you buy. It's just it's the wiring, the speakers, the software to make it say what it says. So it's a pretty cool thing.
Well, it's needed.
Absolutely.
Some of those campuses are so large. A last question. The Active Defender Program. Now, that's the one we all read about in the pilot on Sunday, right? It was locally created?
That is correct. Jim Boyd, a local gentleman, actually brought this idea to it was actually with us for another reason, our Safe and Healthy Schools Committee meetings that we have quarterly. And while we were there, Jim, he's a software developer, and said, you know what, I think I could build something that could be used in your schools to help alert people through their phones. And he started to work on it and in a very short amount of time, had a great, working model. We piloted it at Carthage Elementary in the fall of last year. It worked very well. So then we moved to install it in all of our schools last spring. And now it's on every campus, and virtually every staff member has it on their phone. It's great in the sense of it saves seconds. Seconds or hours when it's a real crisis. So, the fact that a teacher can pull up just think of this scenario: a teacher pulls up in the parking lot in the morning, they get out of their car, and they see a man walking across the parking lot carrying a gun. Well, they're maybe 100 yards from the building. They see it, they can protect themselves, but how do they protect anybody else? And so, you're nervous. Now I've got to call the office. I've got to get somebody to answer the phone. I've got to say what I just saw. I mean, that could take 30, 45 seconds to initiate a lockdown. With this app, they hit it, it opens within, 5 to 7 seconds, and immediately they can lock the whole school down. It'll go off on everybody's phone that has the app on it, and it's a loud sound. We did a training here with the central office last week. So anybody can set it off from anywhere, and it really saves time.
Good.
I hate that we have to talk about any of these things, but I'm really happy that there are programs in place to support our students and staff for their safety. So thank you.
All right, we'll look at some of our key outcomes now, and as Dr. Locklear shared, there are many things that we're very proud of, some of which we've already talked about. There's also still things that we need to continue to focus and improve upon. So I'm going to talk a little first about some of our discipline data, and we're going to focus first on office referrals. Just to share some good news, we've seen a drop in the number of office referrals over the last 3 years, from 6,500 in 2016-17 to 6,473 in 17-18 to 5,876 in 2018-19. And I'll also share other good news that office referrals declined across all three of our biggest subgroups, white, black, and Hispanic, and for both males and females from 2017-18 to 2018-19. And as great as that is, and it is great, there is a little issue with that. We continue to see racial disparities remain relatively consistent and unchanged in those numbers, especially between our black and our white students. So although our white students make up 63% of our student demographics, they only account for roughly 40% of our office referrals. And then conversely, our black students make up only 16% of our student population, but account for 40% of our office referrals. It's interesting that our Hispanic students make up 14% of our student population, but they account for approximately 12% of office referrals. So it's also, I think, notable that this similar disparities between black and white students seem to exist across all of our discipline data, and similarly, our Hispanic students seem to align very well with the demographics across our discipline data. So when we look at another data point here related to discipline suspension consequences, we see some similar things. So in comparing the consequences from 17-18 to 18-19, we see that partial day ISS decreased by 49. We see full day ISS decreased by 69. Bus suspensions decreased by 88. But we did see an increase in OSS, out of school suspension, by 154. So overall, the number of combined suspension consequences for all races dropped by 213 between 17-18 and 18-19, which is great. We also saw OSS, we talked about the fact that it had increased. It increased for all three of our biggest subgroups, but it did grow more for our black students. It grew by 110 than it did for our white students, who grew by 30, and for our Hispanic students, who grew by 15. So again, some good news that it's coming down, but still concerning that the disparities persist, whereas our white students account for 37% of our suspension consequences, and our black students account for 43% of our suspension consequences. One final discipline data point here to look at, charges by Moore County Schools Police. The number of charges by our Moore County Schools Police have dropped considerably over the last 3 years, from 309 in 2016-17 to 210 in 17-18 to 185 last year in 2018-19, which is, to go from 309 to 185 in 3 years is great. However, we do see charges for black students. There still continues to be some disparities there. So although the charges for our black students dropped from 161 in 16-17 to 98 in 17-18, the number of charges for black students remain the same. In 18-19, they remain the same at 98. So that's a good thing. They didn't go up, but also did not drop with some of the other subgroups. Talked about the disparities continue there. Black students make up 53% of our charges last year, and white students 38% of our charges. One other piece of good news, over that 3-year period, 704 students, student charges, of those 704, 500 or 71% had the chance to participate in our Moore County Schools Second Chance program, or Teen Court, which is run through Moore County's Department for Juvenile Justice. And those programs are for first-time offenders who, if they follow the prescribed program and do a little, like for the Second Chance, they'll spend some time on the campus, they'll write a letter saying what they did, how they plan to correct that, do some community service, and do some classes with an SRO for a half day on Saturday. Then their charges drop and their record is cleared. It never goes on their record, which is a great thing.
Bowers,
Yes, ma'am.
what are we doing to address the disparities that you've mentioned?
Several things. We've number one, we're being more aware. We're looking at our discipline data in a way that we've not looked at it in the past. We now have Educators Handbook, which is a consistent way to track this data across all schools. And then we're studying it, we're looking at it. So when we get data quarterly, we bring it back and share it with our administrators at our leadership team meetings. As a part of that as well, Cinda and I have led some different professional development as a part of those things. We focused on some PBIS strategies that have been proven and shown to help reduce disparities. We've focused on had some training around implicit bias, around vulnerable decision points, and this year we're working with a team of professors from Western Carolina University to provide some equity training for our administrators. And I will share that the program highlight for the 12th is going to be around our Moore County Schools journey toward equity. So we'll be sharing more about those things that I just shared.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
I take it that the Second Chance program is one program that's designed to help help keep repeat offenders from happening. Are we doing anything proactive to try to drive these numbers down before somebody gets in trouble?
That's a good question, and we are.
Actually, if you go back to the second slide where you went through all the things that are being done, like capturing kids' hearts,
Correct.
positive behavior intervention supports, I mean, we'd have to go back and repeat the first part of the presentation, because all of those are targeted at creating the kind of culture where students make good choices. So, and that's intensive, and it's broad, and it's intentional, and we've been doing it for several years. And it's the reason why the number of arrests have come down dramatically over the last 3 years, the number of charges placed, I should say, and the number of referrals have come down dramatically over time. Today's presentation, when we focus on the issues at hand, are an example of the high standards that we've established. The fact that we're putting out all this information to the public is something that's brand new. It wasn't here 4 years ago. And so this whole presentation today is all about continuing to sustain and improve the culture that we've worked hard to establish here over these last 5 years. So I'd say the answer to that is in the presentation itself.
Okay.
And absolutely the things that we've done related to improving cultures on our campuses. And like I said, PBIS, capturing kids' hearts, the fact that we're asking our students for their feedback and getting those survey results and then using that data is all helpful.
I didn't mean to step on your toes, but I think, clearly that's what the whole presentation's about.
And John, for the Second Chance program, I talked to the chief, it was 2 or 3 years ago, the success rate was 80% of the kids never returned.
I know that we often have children on campus who are on probation or wearing ankle bracelets within our classrooms. Are we doing anything specific to assist this group? I know PBIS is great and capturing kids' hearts is great, but is there anything aimed directly at our children who are already into the criminal system that we can actually provide on the school campus, or are we hindered by legalities? We don't want something happening again at school, for sure. And of course, I know a lot of them on parole are not because of school-related activities
And I would
either.
say
That's
generally-
because of
I would say
something happened
generally most
elsewhere.
of those are not, and I don't know that that we have a tremendous amount of those students, but of course we want to do anything that we could to support them. So, my answer there would be that there's nothing specifically aimed at these students who maybe, have been in trouble with the law, and now that we're working with them at school to keep them from being repeat offenders again. But, we do have all the supports that we have in place for everyone. That's a possibility for them there. I will point back to the fact that, we talk about everyone in our campus building positive relationships with students. So, not only our teachers, but our SROs, the fact that we can hire our own SROs, that they can, they're trained to work with adolescents. They can build some positive relationships with those students, perhaps. So, a lot of times it's just a negative attitude toward law enforcement. You have an opportunity to be around a law enforcement officer that maybe doesn't, that's they're trained to work with students and with kids, and to have some positive experiences. Maybe that helps as well.
Is that not integrated into the tier structure of MTSS when we look at behavioral and emotional supports? Wouldn't the answer be along the lines of a child who may have gotten in trouble outside of school, if they happen to be on probation? Is there communication between law enforcement, the court system, and the schools that would indicate that if that child's charge that they had in public affects their behavior in school? Is there communication across agencies?
next question.
That's what I was gonna say, is that if a student's on probation and is having no trouble at school, and then we might not necessarily know, as far as the counselors go, but if a student is struggling and having behavior or academic attendance problems, then the counselors and the school-based teams do track that, and will almost always know and be in contact with the probation officer as far as, and sometimes there are kids that are doing fine and we might not have a reason to know, but if they're struggling in school, then the counselors will know with the resource officers, the social workers, and then talking to the probation
That answer your
officers.
question, Ms. Carter? Okay, I want to, at this opportunity, I want to say something now that I was going to wait until the end. It goes back to Ms. Thompson's original question. We do need to make clear to the public and to the board that the behavioral health intervention team is not intended to supplant family mental health providers, and in fact, actually is committed to not doing that. The BIT team is intended to provide that intermediate, temporary assistance, a linkage to the MTSS process, where the MTSS team at the school has identified a high level of intervention that's needed for this child, but under no circumstances does this BIT team replace our community-based and private providers in mental health. And so I want to be real careful that when we say, well, when a parent makes a referral, well, hopefully that parent already has a mental health provider, and that parent and the mental health provider have, working with the child, particularly an older child, have decided that the school needs to know. So really, if they've already identified that there's a significant mental health problem with this child, then it's their decision whether or not we find out. But it's one of the first things that I understand that our BIT team is doing is making sure that that child is getting the full continuum of services, not just in the school, but outside. I don't want anybody thinking that the schools now are in the business of being a mental health provider. We're there to provide assistance to mental health providers to ensure the success of our children. Would you two correct me if I'm out of line there?
That's exactly
I'm
right.
just not sure that was made clear
Right, and
earlier, and I
thank
think
you
it
for-
does need
thank
to
you
be
for
made
bringing that
very
up.
clear. Yeah.
Right,
I
that's right.
appreciate that.
Because there's only 3 therapists that we have for 13,000 kids, so they can't possibly provide all the mental health needs. So the goal is to, for students that if there's a gap, if they can't access community supports, then might be when they would be on their caseload, because for no insurance, for example, or too long of a drive to get to mental health therapy. So they spend a lot of time trying to access and help them access the community providers.
Right.
'Cause that's
We
where
we would
that's
need
where
a
it
lot
belongs.
more resources to provide that level
Yes.
of support. Right now, our job is to fill in
They
those holes,
provide- they
fill in
provide
those
that
gaps.
bridge. They provide
Bridge
that
Fill in
those
bridge
gaps.
in the
That's right.
meantime until they can connect them with that.
That's correct.
So thank you for bringing,
Support our teachers, support our principals to the extent possible,
Yes.
use that term, but to fill in those gaps, so thank you.
yep, thank you. Okay, the next few slides will show you the results of our social emotional learning survey, which was given to students in 3rd through 12th grade last fall. There are two parts to this survey. There are these SEL student competencies, which talk about what the students, how well the students feel about their own social emotional skills. And then there are the student supports and environments section, which shows how well students feel about their school environment. So they're kind of assessing themselves and then assessing their school environment. We chose the topics we felt were most relevant to our schools and then added an extra question about caring relationships. So Panorama offers several different options for our survey. So we choose the topics from what they already have developed. And then we wanted to add our own question, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. The results can be compared to the other students who took this Panorama survey across the country. So anyone who's attached to Panorama, we are able to compare. The percentages, when you look at the percentages, that is the percentage of favorable responses to the question. So that would be agree or strongly agree to something like, my teacher cares about me, or strongly disagree to things like, I feel bullied at school, something like that. So that's what that is. That's what those percentages are. So here you can see that our 3rd through 5th grade students were about average in growth mindset, self-efficacy, and social awareness, but they were below the 20th percentile in the measure of grit, which is really interesting. So there's several questions within grit, but the question that had the lowest favorable response was, how often do you stay focused on the same goal for 3 months at a time? So that's the 3rd through 5th. And then the 6th through 12th student competencies show that our students drop significantly once they get into secondary school, and they're below the 40th percentile in all areas, but social awareness was our lowest, which is below the 20th percentile. The lowest question on here was, during the past 30 days, how clearly were you able to describe your feelings? So this points to our next MTSS goal, which will be looking at developing a social emotional framework for all of our schools so that we can start being more intentional about teaching social emotional learning skills specifically in the classroom.
Before we go on there, obviously this is grades 6 through 12, but knowing how gifted y'all are at manipulating numbers, do we have a breakdown in that 6 to 12 area to see where it begins to drop with these numbers?
We do. Yep, I've got all the questions here, but pretty much across the country, it starts to drop in middle school and then drops till 10th grade, and then it starts to come back up again.
That's what I was,
So that you figured that would
yeah.
happen, right? Because you were there for so long. But yeah, by 12th grade, they're starting to come back up on the, feeling better about themselves and about school as well. So now this is the environmental support. So this is how the students feel about their environment. So as you can see, this is the 3rd through 5th grade, and this is nice. I'll have green dots there, meaning that we compare in the average range compared to school systems across the country about how students feel engaged and safe and have a sense of belonging and positive teacher relationships. Now you might ask about the caring relationships, why that doesn't have a comparison. That's because that is our special question that we just developed for Moore County schools. And those questions are, at least one adult at school truly cares about me, and there's at least one adult at this school I can go to if I need help. So that was those two questions we wanted specifically to add there. And so that's the difference there. And then, again, 6 through 12, they do start to drop again, except for that caring relationship question stays up there at 70%, which is really nice to know that even in secondary school, there's at least one adult that most students feel like they can find to help them if they need help, and one adult that cares. So the caring relationships, so the teacher-student relationships, one, those questions are more complicated. So they are, for example, how many of your teachers would be concerned if you came into class upset? Or how many of your teachers would you be excited to have again in the future? So those are 2 of the 5 questions there. So it's a little more complicated, so it's a little harder to say yes. So now it's also important to note that the neutral answer in these questions does not load into the favorable response. So it's not like the students are saying nobody cares about me. The neutral response is about half of my teachers. And so an agree or a strongly agree is more than that. So the students aren't saying none of my teachers care, but 32% are saying that few or none would be concerned if they were upset or would be excited to see them in the future or really showing general interest. So it's still something to pay attention to and see what we can do for.
Have you looked at this data in terms of the schools that have Capturing Kids' Hearts or some of these other, the Positivity Project, I know in other schools? Is there any correlation that you see with those programs and the outcomes, or is it the same across the board?
We have not compared too much from school to school at this point, haven't had a chance to do that, but that would absolutely be the next steps to look into that, because I think the hypothesis would certainly be that it would make a difference.
Well, and our window for taking the SEL for this year actually opened today. So the next 2 weeks from now through the 15th, our schools will be giving this SEL survey to students again. And then we'll have 2 years of data that we can look at, and make some comparisons between ourselves. And great point to look at some of the positive things that we have going on in some of these schools to see if they correlate. And then, when we think about moving forward, even with our other surveys, the climate culture and the YRBS, after this year after next year, we'll be able to start looking at some cohort data, which will be really nice to see.
So this is like a benchmark. This is your starting point, is what you're looking at for
Right.
these surveys.
Yes,
This was
last
last
year's
year's survey, and we
Okay.
have not done this year's yet. But yeah, it would be nice for those new Capturing Kids' Hearts schools to be able to compare last year to this year, see if there's a difference.
So when it gives us the numbers and compares them to others nationally, is it broken down nationally well enough that we could say, okay, so these kids in small rural high school somewhere rank everybody better because then everybody in school, as opposed to the inner city?
We can actually,
school.
this data set is huge, and you can, just by clicking a button, you can see the normal curve, and you can see where our line moves up and down. So we just left this for all schools to compare it to. But yes, you can dive really deep and compare it to rural versus urban versus free and reduced lunch and that kind of thing.
And I know it's virtually impossible to come up with a school system that exactly matches
Right.
what our details are, but
Exactly.
it would be interesting to see if there's another,
But when I
Another
go
one about
back
the
and
same.
when I've been doing that clicking and seeing it move around and stuff, it doesn't change it a whole lot.
does it not?
It doesn't. I mean, a little bit in terms of, how extreme, but, but the red ones aren't average even when I click the other ones. So, yeah, it's interesting, really interesting, so. All right, so that was SEL. And so now, the next slide talks about the climate and culture survey results. We gave this one to the 7th, 9th, and 11th graders, and we had developed the questions based on a past climate culture survey. And so that's why there are no comparisons on this one, because these were our questions. So we're excited, though, that Panorama has just this year released an equity survey, which really aligns very closely to this one. So that's something that we're going to look at in the future, like maybe do theirs instead of our own, and then we would have more of that data. So we're excited about that.
So these are the affirmative then?
These
So
are the affirmatives, yeah. So if
They're-
it's an anti-bully question, they'll say 73% said, no, I haven't been bullied, and 17% said yes. And also within each, there's several questions within each topic. So, yeah.
And
So
just
these
for
are
historical
favorable.
purposes, the previous work we've done was based on the Office of Civil Rights survey.
That's right.
So it's not the exact OCR survey, but it's built on the themes in the OCR survey to keep up with work we've done in the past.
That's right, that's
Yes, sir.
right, so that we'd have that data ongoing, exactly. All right.
One question. Safety on the eighth graders, it's really low. Any idea why?
I know exactly why. That's an excellent question. It's because the question is about, do I ride my bicycle with my helmet on?
That helps
Okay,
bring
you're
some
moving-
clarity.
You're moving ahead here. Okay. that's
That brings some
So-
clarity.
Here we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So our eighth graders need to wear their helmet when they ride their bicycles, those who are listening.
So takes us right into our next slide here,
Nice
which is
segue.
why our BS results, use risk behavior survey results. And of course, last year we started to administer our own version of this, in which we'll continue and plan to continue to do annually to students in grades 8, 10, and 12. So what we see here, again, as Cinda said, the responses that you see are the percentage of favorable responses related to these questions. When we're looking at grade 8, we see that the highest percentage of favorable responses were in the categories related to drug use at 95% and tobacco use at 90%. I think it's worth noting and concerning that 19% of our eighth graders reported unfavorable responses related to suicide. So, 81 sounds good, but that means 19% of our students have some issues, around suicidal ideations.
Dr. Powers, could you read, when you look at, for instance, 83% alcohol use, could you explain exactly what that looks like? Because when I read this, it sounds like 83% have used alcohol,
And
so
it's-
could
It's the
you?
percent of favorable in terms of what we would want to hear and what we think is good. So 83% of students are saying, I don't drink alcohol. Okay, so
This
that's.
chart is
The-
very
the- yeah,
difficult to
the
look
chart-
at.
If this is online and somebody goes to it without you there to explain it, that perception can be had with that. It also, we might need to, in the space that's available off to the right for what we have posted, we might want to make clear that each of these percentages are a composite of multiple questions.
Correct, yeah.
And then these are the positive responses, and that the multiple questions. So board members would know they're multiple questions because you all approved the surveys previously. You've seen them, you know that. But we might make better use of this empty space off to the right to put some explanation
And
there.
say
I can
favorable
understand why
responses.
board
Sure.
members are having some
When I
concerns
saw that, I
with
was
it. Yeah, I didn't think of it when I
confused.
looked at it before, but I can see that.
Yeah,
Just
we
so
can
f-
absolutely do
So
that.
for
Yeah,
clarification, as we're online, so where it says 83% alcohol use, the questions are things like, have you used alcohol? Or do you use alcohol on a regular basis?
In the past
or-
30 days.
Or in the past 30 days?
Or there's
Do-
a period of time.
Do you have friends that, use alcohol? And so if they're saying no to these questions, then we're getting that's a
That's the
positive score.
favorable response, yes.
The alcohol questions were related to age when having their first drink, what they drink, frequency and amount of drinking,
So 83% said they've never had a drink.
or, yeah, favorable responses, correct.
That makes it sound so much better.
What type of violence-related behaviors? Is this toward them or the ones that they've enacted?
Violence-related behaviors are related to fighting,
Carrying
a
weapons.
weapon,
Okay,
are what are some of those questions, and I think there's 4 or 5 related.
okay, thank you.
And board members, you'll forgive staff for not drilling down that far, because remember, this is not a presentation about the youth risk behavior survey. It's a strategic plan update, so there's a lot of room to cover here, and so we didn't come
It's all
prepared
very
to present
interesting.
each one, so we can certainly do
And we
that.
do have all the, the results. If you're interested, we can give you stacks of paper.
There's, yeah,
for your-
many binders
reading.
can be brought with this, but I think the key is what our folks at the school level are doing to address their specific areas of concern, and then what we're doing to support our schools.
And to go back
Ultimately,
to
that's
Mr.
where we want to
Weaver's-
be.
Mr. Weaver's question, you see 47% for safety, and that, I know that's concerning, but as Cindy said, the questions are related to wearing your helmet when riding your bike, skateboarding, or rollerblading, wearing your seatbelt when riding in a car, and then if they've ever ridden in a car with someone who has been drinking alcohol, those are the safety-related
All right,
questions.
are there any questions under safety that relate to feeling safe at school?
There's a safe at school question in the,
That's more of the climate survey. This
the
is
climate
wired
survey.
That's right, but also, see, it's broken up. You have violence-related behaviors, so that section is broken up. As the board knows, because they approved the survey, they know that it's broken out that way, but they may not remember, because there's a lot of questions in that survey.
There is a question, I think, in the youth risk behavior survey that says, I've missed school during this, how many days have you missed because you didn't feel safe at school?
Right. But that wouldn't be under safety, that would be under violence-related behaviors that they've observed, participated in, or were victimized by.
Correct.
That
It's
would
not-
be there,
It's not
so.
under safety.
When we think of the traditional school safety tag, it would be more the violence-related behaviors.
Correct.
The stuff under safety has to do with their general safety that they feel in general, not just at school.
Correct.
And the questions are the same, both for the 8th grade and the 10th and the 12th grade.
There are some differences, but the safety-related questions are generally the same, yes.
So we don't have as many high schoolers riding bikes either.
Correct,
Yeah.
which is why you'll see,
Well,
a
they
difference
didn't-
here related to safety too. Safety here you see is at 79%.
That's what I was
They didn't
noticing.
ask
Right.
they didn't ask the bicycle question
Right.
for 10th and 12th graders.
Okay.
They asked, do you text while you drive, or do you drink while you drive? Or do you ride with other people who are drinking?
And the flip side of that is when you make the comparison, you'll see that alcohol use is lower for 10th and 12th grade than it is for 8th grade.
Because they're saying no.
It goes the other way.
Correct.
Because now experimentation has entered in as we get to be 16 years old and 17.
And the same with the tobacco, yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Well, those, again, I think we've pretty much covered this slide through some of the conversation and some of what's been shared and some of the questions that have been asked in terms of 10th and 12th grade. So we'll go on and look at where we go from here. So diving deeper. Equity training, that's something we addressed from Chair Wallen-Miller's question earlier and what we're doing with that. And like I said, we'll be sharing more around that at our, as the program highlight for the November 12th meeting. Reunification after a crisis. Reunification training, I think, is a logical next step with what we've done with our crisis management plans and what we're doing with that. We feel good about our plans, but now you think about it, if something really happened and we're at Union Pines High School and we need to reunite 1,300 students, with the 2,500 parents who are going to show up that day, and how do we do that? And we have a plan for how we do it, but there's no question in our minds that it could be better, and we could do some training around that. So we're going to work with public safety again this year and hopefully collaborate again with them on a grant that would allow us to bring this training to Moore County, hopefully in the spring. Full-scale safety exercises, again, the next logical step after doing tabletops 2 years ago, functional exercises at each school last year, a full-scale exercise on a campus that involves all of our outside agencies and their response would be a logical next step that we'd like to look to. Study and use of this data we've talked about. Now that we'll start to have more than a year's worth of data, start making some comparisons and looking at that and how it can be even more useful. Want to continue to focus on our student support services staffing, SROs, nurses, our mental health professionals, counselors, psychologists, social workers. We need to continue to try to have more of those staff members as a part of our district and get closer to those nationally recommended ratios. We want to continue to expand capturing kids' hearts. Our hope is that we can possibly bring that full staff training to the Aberdeen staffs and the Southern Pines staffs as those schools become one school next year. We're hopeful for that. Our code of conduct, we're over the course of this year, we're going to be looking at that code of conduct and to see if, do we need to take a look at this and possibly have some revision to our code of conduct? It hasn't been looked at in a while. And we think there may be some things that we can do with that. We're going to involve, of course, our administrators, school staff, parents. We'll ask for some of their feedback as well. We've already started this process with our students through our superintendent student advisory council. They've already started to give us feedback on that. So we'll do that this year. And this continue to look at other possible restorative justice practices. That's really what our Second Chance program is. That's what Teen Court is. Aspire is something new that we're doing this year related to first-time tobacco offenders at school. Instead of, okay, it's a 2-day suspension because you've got a vape at school. Well, no, you've got 1 week to complete this online module. That's going to take about 4 hours and turn your certificate in, and that's your consequence. So other ways to still provide a consequence and try to educate students, but not necessarily to say, stay home for 3 days. which is not a good thing.
And a lot, the mental health professionals, nurses, SROs, I remember that those were line items that we were asking to be included, to try to get our staffing levels up to, our national recommended averages for our school systems. And unfortunately, we just could not, gain the money for that. So we just need to keep adding and making sure that that's inclusive going forward.
I just want to say that it's really helpful to see this presentation and to reflect on the strategic plan. If you go back to slide 4, where we talked about what the 3 objectives were, which was creating safe and supportive cultures. 2 was reviewing and revising our policies to reduce discipline disparity, and 3 was to look at our mental and physical health challenges within our student body. I mean, this is the first time now we've seen these objectives that we approved last year aligned with some data that we've begun to collect, and that's really helpful for us to be able to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening. And this is benchmark data, right? So this is the first time we've collected it. We don't really know if the data are good or bad because or what we want to do with it. You know, usually you want to grow it and make it better, but you can't know where you're going to go without seeing where the data are to begin with. So I just found this, it was overwhelming in terms of amount of data, but I could really see how it could benefit us going into the future. So I just want to thank you for pulling this all together and putting up with our questions.
I want to wish
And
you
we
luck.
clearly had a lot,
Wish you
so.
luck at going into the future, because it's hard to stay ahead of a teenager. 5 years ago, nobody worried about e-cigarettes and vaping. That was not a situation on a high school campus. And now you cannot get away from it.
And how that
You know,
impacts
it's-
other students that are around that student, you know,
Exactly.
even though it's not only the children and the students that are being impacted, it's those that are around those students, so. I
And
think
of
it's
course, there are all kinds of other fads that come and go and change, and to stay ahead that's a challenge.
I thank you too for wanting to look at the code of conduct, because I do think we have a lot of things that they sign, and sometimes I think kids don't know what they're signing, and that's probably one of them, because it's not explained as a whole in the school, because we do like PBIS stuff where they have to sign something. So thank you for looking into that, because it could be something maybe we need to even get rid of.
He said we received input during the Student Advisory Committee. He should have said we received robust student input.
We absolutely did.
We had a room full of teenagers, and we asked their opinion, and they delivered. We have much work to do. Madam Chair, I want to note that on the slide that indicated the number of discipline referrals last year by subgroup, white, African American, and Hispanic and other, I totaled, we didn't have the total on there. I totaled 5,397 total referrals. It would
Slide
be,
4, he said.
yeah, about the 4th one. When you get into the key outcomes, about the very first one, maybe, total referrals. Office referrals. We don't, did I miss the,
19,
right,
5,876.
5,876, okay.
Those numbers are just the 3 subgroups. That doesn't count your other, doesn't count your Asian, your American Indian, your multi.
Okay, I was a middle school principal before we had even the Columbia system. So if you wanted to track discipline data, you did it by hand. I was a rare bird in that I did it by hand. And I do recall very vividly that in 1988, in a school with, a middle school with about 840 students, 1 assistant principal, 1 principal, no school resource officer, and 1 guidance counselor, 1,200 discipline referrals by hand. I had them broken down by racial group, I had them broken down by gender, I had them broken down by offense in school. And as a staff, we looked at that data, and we talked about it, and we talked about trends that we had. The point that I want to make is that when people like me who've been around a long time, that we remember the good old days when everything was perfect, I want to note that that number I just shared was in a good place, a school district about the same size as Moore County, a middle school with over 800 students, and a school that, based on the numbers we've reported today, would have accounted for 20 to 25%. And it was considered to be a school that had well-behaved kids. So there were others that had it worse than us, but they can walk around today and claim that was perfect because there was no data gathering in those days. We don't really know what a lot of those numbers were in that time. So my compliments go to our teachers, to our parents, to our students, and to our administrators who are now looking at these numbers and intentionally designing responses that make our culture as healthy as possible for our students and the people that serve them. So, Madam Chairman, unless there's any other questions, shall we take a brief pause
Just
before we
going
go?
to suggest that, a few minutes, 5 minutes?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
At your service, Madam Chair,
Call the meeting back to order. Dr. Grimacy.
and Dr. Locklear.
Thank you, sir. Madam Chair, board members, again, we appreciate the opportunity, and I'm honored to have the opportunity today with this group of leaders to share some information about our district's plan of improvement for our low-performance schools, and to be with our principals of our low-performance schools as they share their respective school teams' plan, school improvement plan, as they work to continuously improve their schools and to drive their schools out of low-performance status. Joining me today is Aberdeen Elementary Principal Dante Poole, as you all are very familiar, Robbins Elementary Principal Christine Larita, Elise Middle School Principal Jenny Wiley, Southern Middle School Principal Marcy Cooper, Director for Curriculum and Instruction Dr. Bridget Johnson, Executive Officer of Academic Student Support Services Dr. Mike Metcalf, and I'm here as well. Again, pleased to be with you and honored to be with you to share some information about this. On October 3rd, the State Board of Education identified 4 low-performance schools in Moore County: Aberdeen Elementary, Robbins Elementary, Elise Middle, and Southern Middle. As part of state board policy and North Carolina law, the superintendent is required to share with you and present to you a plan for improvement of those low-performance schools and what the district is going to do to support those schools. Also, as part of that law and state board policy, as a board, you are asked to share those plans with the public and with the school communities to provide input, and that's part of what we'll be asking for your endorsement of today. But really, our main reason for having this opportunity to share with you today is really to talk about those plans themselves and the work that those teams and those schools are doing. And so we appreciate the opportunity to do that. And I hope what you'll find today as these school principals are sharing, and we're sharing a little bit about the district plan, is you'll hear our school district's vision and mission come out in what they're talking about. That they're working to inspire and to engage our students and our staff to support additional success and to push our students and staff towards additional success. I also hope that you're here as a district, that we're looking at how we can strategically support our low-performing schools and to help continue to push them forward towards continuous improvement. I've asked Mike if he would share more about the details of how our low-performing schools are identified, how they come out of that status, and then talk a little bit about those school performance grade that identifies them. Mike?
Thank you, Tim. Of course, the low-performing schools designation is governed by the North Carolina General Statute. The low-performing schools are those that receive a school performance grade of a D or an F and a growth score of met expected growth or did not meet expected growth. In order to get out of that designation, that low-performing school designation, the school must either receive a score of a C, or they can receive a score of a D, but they'll need to be exceeding growth, not be that designation. We, of course, have 4 schools that are low-performing. They are Aberdeen Elementary School, Robbins Elementary School, Elise Middle School, and Southern Middle School. The school performance grade is based on 2 different data points. The first data point is proficiency. Of course, that's very simple. It's just whether a student has passed the test or didn't pass the test. The second data point that we look at very closely, it's part of the school performance grade, is growth. With growth, a student is compared to a like group that they're assigned to at the beginning of the year. For example, students based on their test scores would be put into a group of students from across the state of North Carolina who have similar test scores. At the end of the year, when they take the undergrad assessment or the end of course assessment, their performance is compared to that like group. So if they do as well as the average of that like group, they've met expected growth for the year. If they do better than that like group that they've been assigned to, then they've exceeded growth. If they don't do as well, they did not meet growth. And that is all compiled into a score, an index score that's used for the teacher, it's used for the school, used for the district as well. Growth is very important to us. We really look at both of those 2 data points. We do look at proficiency and we do look at growth, but growth is very important to us for this reason. We know that we have some students who come into school, they're struggling right from the beginning. They may be special needs students, or they may be students that haven't had some of the resources that their peers may have had. And so they may not be able to pass that test. And that doesn't mean that they can't show a year's worth of growth at the end of the year, or even exceed growth. On the other end of that, we may have some really strong students who can pass that test regardless of what happens in the classroom or doesn't happen in the classroom. They may pass the test, they may show proficiency, but they may not show growth when they're compared to that like group that come into the year in the same place they are based on their previous tested scores. So growth is really key to us. The formula for the school performance grade is 80% proficiency and 20% growth. Now, I know that the board has advocated for a change in that formula, and I would argue that that would be a good place to go. If you change that formula to 50% growth and 50% proficiency, both Elise Middle School and Southern Middle School would not be here today because they would not have that low-performing label or designation. The chart that we have here in front of you goes back 5 years and shows the achievement score, the growth score, and their performance grade. And you'll notice with both Elise and Southern, they are very close to a great score with the growth. 70 would be met expected growth. Exceeding growth would be 85. And if you look at Elise, they're almost at 85 with an 81.4. We're going to get right into the school improvement plans, but we're in this together. This is a team approach, and we're going to be providing great support for the schools. We do that by supporting their school improvement plans. These include a comprehensive needs assessment. We'll be talking about NC STAR, an online facilitation tool. We're talking about that today. We'll be talking about our process checks that we work with the schools on. And we will be taking continuing a laser-like focus on instructional frameworks, professional learning communities, and student health, safety, and welfare. And we're going to start with Dante.
Are you ready already? Man. First, I want to thank you for the privilege. I'm not going to click. Somebody's clicking for me, I think. I want to thank you for the privilege it is to lead a school in this great district. I think all of us would say we are committed to doing great things and continuing to give students the things that they need to be successful in their lives and not just academically. We lose sleep over this stuff because it matters to us, and lots happen, and so we make no excuses for the journey that we've been on, but it is our journey, and so we appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about the things that we've done, what we are doing, and our hopes for the future for our schools. So thank you for that. Thank you. So I was struggling today because my staff is meeting, and I wouldn't let them not meet without me. You know, it's like, no, we can't meet, you're not coming. I said, no, you have to meet because they're preparing for what we look like when we're together as one school. Our theme this year is one school, one pride, one promise. And we've made a promise to make this better. And part of making this better is looking at our school improvement efforts. We are really digging in. And as you look at our school improvement summary, it gives kind of a helicopter view of the things that we're doing, or our goals, should I say. We're looking at increasing, everybody wants to increase academic achievement, and that's important. And so we often look at reading and math and science as the areas that we're looking at. We're also looking at our culture and our climate and how do we improve those things, because those go together, right? You can't improve a school unless you're improving the climate and the culture of the building. And so we've made investments, both personally and collectively as a school, and doing some things that we think are going to help us improve those things. We're looking at increasing those percentages by at least 5 percentage points. it was a punch in the gut for us when we looked at our data this year. 2 years in a row, we're increasing by 7%, and then we get this year, and we're almost passed out when we saw it, because we know we're doing great things with kids, and some of those good things that we're doing involve looking at core instruction. Many of our kids come in the door, they're 2 and 3 years behind, and they have to have good core instruction the first time around to make sure they're getting what they need. And so we intentionally build in a 90-minute math block, a 90-minute ELA block, and 245 social studies and science block, and we butt them up against each other, so there are 3 90-minute blocks that happen throughout our day. Kids are not just getting 60 minutes of math, they're getting 90 minutes of math every day. We have 2 interventionists that are working alongside of us, and they are, when I started, they were just LLI, or reading interventionists. And I told them, I said, it's not enough for you to just focus in on reading, because that's not just our problem. We're like in the emergency room. We need all hands on deck doing everything. And so we began to bring them into the process, and they've taken ownership of it, and they're now doing math intervention as well as reading intervention to try to help close the gap for students. And so they're running small group interventions with our staff. And if you look more deeply at our IndyStar or NC Star outline online, you'll see some of those things. One of the areas that we really wanted to focus in again was instructional developing our instruction. And we're really fortunate to have the support of the curriculum instruction team from the district who's coming in. You'll have to scroll all the way down to, in here, thank you. For our curriculum and instruction teams, specialists rather, part of Bridget's team that come down, and they're in our building every week. And they're in classrooms, and they're not just working with teachers, but they're working with students as well. And so it's nothing for them to walk into the classroom and my teachers to say, hey, can you take that small group for me? And they're pulling those students for us. The other thing that's happening is we were looking for a research-based math intervention program, because we had lots of reading resources in the building, but we couldn't quite put our hands on good math intervention. And so we found the Bridges to Learning math intervention program, and we're doing it this year for the first time to see what kind of results we get. But all of my math teachers are taking an online course to know how to implement it with fidelity. So don't just put a program in their hands, but we're really teaching them how to do it. My coach is doing an online course as well to make sure that she's supporting them in the implementation of it. And we're starting to see them utilize the program and getting some results with kids. And so we're excited about that. The other thing is just really continuing to support the work that we think aligns with the district priorities of the PLC work, looking at how we do PLCs. And we've always kind of been a data-oriented staff, but really digging in much deeper and saying, okay, these kids got it, these kids didn't. What do we do now with those? Our pyramid is inverted. So if you look at some schools, they have, 80% get it, 10%, kind of need a secondary, and then you got the upper tier. We're inverted in that there's probably 70 or 80% of our kids that are struggling for various reasons. We don't get to control their life and what's happened. We just know they come to us that way, and we do what we do to help close that gap for them. And so having the right programs in place, we think, will help close that gap for them. And so looking at PLCs and really allowing the teachers to have moments where they're looking at data and saying, what is it that we did? Like, we just finished the NC check-in, and we provide them with a data sheet, and they begin to dig in, and they'll look at what they taught, how kids got it, why they didn't get it, and we'll begin to do flexible grouping in the building. And so kids will begin moving, and they'll go from one classroom where that's their homeroom teacher. That teacher teaches them math. Well, all 4 teachers, maybe on the 4th grade team, will begin to teach math during the intervention block, and those kids will begin to move and go to those places so they can learn in a different way and have instruction come to them in a different way. And so our teachers went to, our grade level chairs went to the PLC training this summer. Because we wanted to, again, make sure we're digging in, how are we doing PLCs, continuing to evaluate, how do we get better at, looking at our instruction and looking at the data. And that was really eye-opening for them. It was affirming for some of the things that they were doing, but it was also like, okay, we need to get better at this piece of it. And so they're beginning to work on that. One of the things that one of the teams is working on, they're doing a book study on what do you do when the kids already know, because we do have a cohort of kids in the building that know. And they're like, we're not growing those kids, and how are we gonna grow those kids? Because their growth matters too. And so they're doing a book study on that so they can look at how we can grow those kids. We just came out of a meeting today with our AIG teacher, just wrestling together about how do we grow, how do you help support the growth of those high-flying kids in classrooms, and how do you support the teacher's instruction around those kids. And so that's been good to do. We are also working across grade levels. And so over the past few years, the 2nd and 3rd grade teams have worked vertically, kind of looking at it, because there's a big shift from 2nd grade to 3rd grade when they began to take ELGs. And one of the things that we were recognizing is that the 2nd grade teachers didn't quite understand all of what Read to Achieve was about, and how do we get them there. So they began to meet vertically just to have those conversations, and they began to come over and help us administer the ELG at the end of the school year so they could at least look at this test and see what kids were expected to do. And they were like, we got to change the way we're teaching 2nd graders because we're not getting them ready for that. And so it was exciting to see that happen. And now this year we'll begin to do K-5 vertical conversations and planning together, which I think really sets us up well for moving into a new school together. I think those understandings from what that standard looks like in kindergarten and how that standard affects what they need to know in 5th grade. So I think sometimes it's hard to see that when you're not having those conversations, especially when you're not in the same building. And so to be able to provide them that opportunity is really great. Our specials teachers are also working to integrate the content into the work that they're doing. And so our PE and music teachers are supporting math, and the media specialist and our art teacher are supporting ELA, and then we have a STEM lab. And that STEM lab is just an amazing effort for us to focus in on science, because we feel like science is one of those places where if we can get this right with kids, it's something that kids really love. Some kids like reading and some kids like math, but most kids like science. It's cool to be able to do science, and so we want them to not just enjoy the science, but to perform well in the science curriculum. And so the vocabulary is woven throughout, not just the STEM. She pre-teaches the standard before the teacher teaches the standard. And so they get a look ahead of time. So when the teacher begins to talk about it, they go, oh, yeah, we did that in STEM lab. And there are experiences in STEM that I think are really supporting that work in the classrooms. And then doing curriculum nights. Probably the most successful curriculum night we had was last year. We did a science night, but the kids did they created these presentations, and they focused in on African American scientists, because 70% of my school is minority. And so they looked at the people who were creating and developing the things that they consume and use. And they made presentations to their parents in the school community about the people that they discovered. And it was amazing to see that many parents and families come out to be a part of that. It's on our plan to do it again. Really excited about just our music program that's developing. We have a new music teacher. He has a 50-member chorus. Just incredible kinds of things. Those things speak to the overall culture and climate of the building, that everybody wants to do something to help make kids experience success in the ways that those kids are wired. Our vision is every child, every day. And so I meet with every student. I'll begin my meetings next week. I set a desk outside each of their classrooms. I meet with them individually. They develop a goal sheet. And on that goal sheet, they begin to talk about how they performed this last 9 weeks, what their goal is for the next 9 weeks. And they develop those goals with their teachers and share them with their principal so that they get to have a positive interaction with their principal. And it's incredible what they tell me and what I learn from them, and that they get this positive interaction with their principal is incredible. It's incredible. So those are the things that we're moving towards. So when we look at, climate and culture, our discipline numbers are continuing to, they kind of go up and down depending on the cohort of kids. But I still see, even this year, the number of office referrals and the kinds of things that are coming to the office are different because we've done Capturing Kids' Hearts training, because we've done resiliency training. And I ask my staff to do resiliency training, not just for students, but for themselves. Because when you're indulged and engaged in this school improvement work, it is hard to turn around a school, and you get burned out and tired. And so I wanted to make sure they had the support that they needed to be resilient themselves in the work and to teach the kids how to be resilient in that work. And so it's so neat to see them utilize those strategies throughout the building. Even my office staff, kids come in the building and they're in the office and they're all upset, and I watch them ground a kid and get them from where they're wide open to where they're not so much. So again, overall, I think I'm excited about, not that I think I'm excited, I know that I'm excited about the work that we're doing at Aberdeen Elementary School. And we're already beginning to explore A+ as a program that we'll use next year in the new school, where we're integrating the arts and instruction. And it's a program that has a track record for helping turnaround schools improve. And so we're really fortunate to be able to explore that opportunity and to do that work. And again, I could talk forever, but I won't.
Please don't. We do need to move on.
Yes.
Mr. Poole, board members, any questions for Mr. Poole specifically?
I just had a comment, just what you just said, having a happy, vibrant office staff can set a child's day positively.
Yeah.
So I just think that's very important. So I'm glad you're looking at that, because not a lot of people do, so, thank you.
I want to know how many hours are in your day. More than 24, obviously.
Yeah.
Probably for all of you.
Yeah,
but,
don't sleep much, no.
How are you able to get down to the primary school on a regular basis? I know you're trying to split your time.
Yeah, define regular. I am actually able to get down there. We intentionally plan things together as well, like this combined staff meeting today that happened. The team there led that meeting, but we put that together. We have I walk through the building and walk through classrooms and doing some instructional walkthroughs, and so I get down there often. We actually have a Thanksgiving dinner coming up together that our staff will do, so very intentional. Our school improvement teams made the decision to combine and work together this school year already, and so spending a lot of quality time with the primary school staff and students.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tag.
Thank you, Dante. And now, Principal Larita from Robbins Elementary will talk a little about their journey and where they're heading, and share some of her thoughts for the year. Christine?
Thank you. Again, I'll just, Dante basically said it all, but the one point he did make is that it is a journey. I am new to this journey, but have learned a lot in the past couple of months about the great things that have been happening at Robbins. And when I interviewed for the job, one of the things I said to the interview team was that you need to get your story out there. When people Google Robbins, you don't want the only thing them to see is that they are a low-performing school. You need to highlight what is going on inside of your building, all of the wonderful things that are happening, the dedicated staff, the awesome students, and the unique learning opportunities which Robbins has with the dual language program, a lot of the teachers participating in Project GLAD, and we also have STEM classes. So all of those opportunities need to be highlighted, and people need to know that that's what's happening. So the school improvement team this year is in their second year of their plan, and the 3 areas that they've highlighted, look very similar to everyone else's, but one of their biggest was parental involvement, parental and community involvement. And we've already seen some great things happening this year. They decided to move some of the normal curriculum night, literacy night things outside of the school and into the community to get that involvement. And we did our literacy night. We changed the name. They had done that before I got there, Picnic in the Park. And we invited all of the students and their families to come out and to participate in this. We offered them some food, and we did incentives for students attending and the classes with the most participation. And we had over 120 families come out to the park, which was a big deal, from what I understand. And they learned all about the different genres of reading from all different teachers, and they got time to spend and do activities based on those things out in the park with everyone. And it really was a great experience. Everyone talked about it. So we're definitely seeing improvements with that. We talked about school climate, and we've done some things to help with the staff climate and with students. And one of the things we're doing this year is positive office referrals, and that again is something that has really gotten a lot of buzz and a lot of good feedback, especially from parents, because when the teachers fill out the positive office referral, the students come in and we talk about what it says, and they get a t-shirt and a piece of candy, but then I call their parents. And just the reaction of the parents has been amazing. It's been the best part of my week since we've started, just to be able to call. And it's, we average about 4 or 5 a week that I'm calling those parents, and they're just so thankful and so happy to hear good news. So I really think that has helped with school climate. Our third goal, like everyone else, we need to increase proficiency. And we have embraced the same goals that the district has with our PLCs and our PLTs. We've been really intentional about the work that we're doing, and we've given our staff lots of professional development so they know, what we expect and what we need to do during that time. And throughout that process, I've informally, asked teachers questions, sent out some questions, not really a survey, but just trying to get some feedback. And they've just enjoyed that the process seems much more focused and intentional this year, and that we're going in depth with standards. And that's one of those things that we all worry about. Dante mentioned about the inverted pyramid. I think we can all say that our pyramid is inverted. So we need to look at that core instruction. So one of the things that we're doing is looking at the standards and making sure the teachers aren't surface teaching the standards, that they're able to break those standards down, truly understand what it is that needs to be taught and what the students need to learn along the way. And with that, we've developed common formative assessments, and that allows all of the teachers to give the same assessment. So like Dante said, when you look at those results, you look at flexible grouping, and you see that this teacher's class performed really well, or this teacher works really well with the lower kids, and that's when we're able to flexible group. So we have our intervention time, and that's when you walk out in the hallway and you see the kids going to all of the different classrooms on the grade level, so their needs are met through that. So we've spent a lot of time refining that process. We've also done the same thing with MTSS, making sure that all of our needs are met academically, behaviorally, socially, and attendance. And we've combined our PBIS and SST team to make our MTSS team. Sorry for all the initials. But we're really working together to look at the whole child and make sure that all of the teachers have the tools that they need in order to meet their needs.
Is this information available for us to see? I'm sorry. Is this information available for us to, because I didn't see it in the PowerPoint that we got.
No, ma'am, this was not attached to the PowerPoint.
Okay,
This
I
is-
thought, did
this
I
is-
miss something?
No, ma'am. This is the online facilitation tool that Mike mentioned that each school uses to put their in-depth school improvement plan. We certainly can make those in-depth plans available to you if you want to get those. We can download those in a PDF and send it to you.
I just think that this IndaStar gives such a breakdown, and a lot of the questions that I receive are just like what you're saying, you know, what are you doing? And just because you say you're trying to improve proficiency doesn't satisfy some people. But if we can get information that we can share with them that breaks this down to say, here's how the coaches are working, here's what you're doing for community involvement, here's what you're doing to change the culture, you can persuade people that if they participate, this will help. And so things like, information such as this, I think could be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And we'd always encourage folks to reach out to these
yeah.
folks, and they can share the same documents. We're certainly more than happy to share this with the board.
Thank you.
And again, like Dante mentioned, everything we're doing lines up with the goals of the district. And the other thing we're spending a lot of time with is the instructional frameworks. And we are providing professional development for our staff every month. We're highlighting a different aspect of the instructional framework, and the teachers know that when we walk through, that's what we're looking for. We're also using that to highlight some teachers who are using it and using it well, and they will be presenting with the instructional coach for the rest of the staff, so that they know that other people are using it and can see the value, because teachers really need to see the value and need to see the results. So we have been working hard to make sure that that gets implemented, and then with the support of Bridget's team, they're going to come in and do some teaching with the classroom teachers so they can make sure that they are using that instructional framework correctly, and then just supporting them any way that they can in the classroom.
Any other questions for Ms. Larita? Thank you, Christine. We'll now go to Jenny Wiley, principal of Elise Middle School, so Jenny can highlight their work, their school improvement work, and where they're heading, their focus for this year. Jenny?
Absolutely, and thank you. And I'm battling a cold, so just bear with me. But thank you for giving us the opportunity to tell our story. I think that is key because there's a lot of good work going on in 24 schools in this county. And so me being able to share Elise Middle School's bit of that story is very important, so thank you. Our school improvement plan, we are in year 2 of 2. We have refined it because it is a living document, and last year the focus was more on, we want to increase the academic proficiency of all subgroups. But last year, our goal was increasing proficiency, and this year we adapted it. We looked at the data that came in and the school improvement team, and actually the whole school said we want to exceed expected growth. We want to grow these students more than a year's worth, and here's how we're going to do this. And we're really looking at MTSS. That is our big push. Last year was the first year of MTSS at Elise Middle School. It was an implementation year, so it was really just trying to figure out how this whole thing works with PBIS and SS, student support team, trying to put in tiered intervention. What does that look like in the classroom? So we did spend a lot of time in professional development, looking at good core instruction, classroom instruction that works. Also embedding literacy into all content areas, and then also supporting our PLC processes at Elise. This year, MTSS, we jumped in full force, and we have actually created our own tiered system of supports at Elise. one for academics, one for behavior, one for attendance, and one for social emotional learning. And we are really honing in with the staff, the support team, the staff student support team, really trying to focus in on what do we already have in place for these kids, and what are some other things that we can do to support those that are falling into Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention. 82% of our students were in Tier 1 for attendance this past quarter, which is great. That means they were more or less on track, and that's where we want to see that number go higher, but we were, very pleased with that. We also had our discipline numbers come down, and the time in class improved from last quarter, or last year, I should say. So we're really focusing in on what can we do with those kids, and so we're doing a lot of check-in, check-out processes with the kids, having them set short-term goals. They have a mentor on campus that the students have said, I feel this is who I can go to. And so we highlighted those children, and they just, the first cohort of children finished up last Friday. And so we're going to be celebrating their success this week on campus. At the same time, we're really focusing in on those tiered interventions for academics. Our teachers, those secondary teachers, they tend to get, they like that their way, and so we're really pushing through that. And now we have flex grouping in the classrooms. They're really intentional about breaking up into individual groups, and then the teacher is going to work with the different groups based on the needs of those groups, accelerating for those, and then coming back and looping again for the ones who need it a second time around. We're also using that during flex time as well. So they're getting intervention once, if not twice, during the day at some point to support them or accelerate them if needed. Let's see, what else? Our PLCs, we are singletons. One 6th grade language arts teacher, one 7th grade language arts teacher, one 8th grade language arts teacher. So over time, we have worked vertically and aligning their practices, and they are analyzing data from the cohorts as they see the cohorts come up to determine the needs. On the last day of school last year, on that last work day, I walked in on them meeting and already discussing the plans for the next year and what they can go ahead and be preparing for, and the resources that they wanted to talk to me about. Math is doing the same thing, science and social studies. Thanks to the middle school PLC early release day, we have created a middle school professional, early release professional development opportunity for the 5 big middle schools, and we've invited High Falls and Westmore as well. And my singletons have actually met other teachers like them and now have created connections and are able to share and work with them across the county, which has really helped us. We also have teachers in the northern end who are actually PLCing with High Falls and Westmore. So they've actually combined and created an 8th grade science cohort or PLC so that they can work together and align their practices on what they're seeing in class. So we also are working on family engagement and getting our families into the school. We had a very successful Hispanic Heritage event in October. We're also doing a lot of hot topics with our parents. So we asked them what interests them, what would they like to learn more about. Things like understanding my middle school child, to raising a healthy teen, why attendance matters. And so we're putting those, we did this in the previous year, we're doing this again this year, and supporting the parents that way and providing them a little, what can you do at home, and what can we do to support you here at school. So.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
On one of the reports that we received, it says that you only have a instructional coach 50% of the time. Is that because of size? Okay. And Ms. Loretta, it didn't mention an instructional coach. Okay, you do. So that's going to be part of your improvement team also. Okay. Thank you.
Jenny, I appreciate you sharing the collaboration with other schools and with other teams. I was actually going to ask that question, but I would think that would be helpful to share information and your different with your different teachers and your teams with maybe some at another school that's doing the same thing. So I appreciate you sharing that.
The partnership, like I said, those early release days have really given several of my teachers an opportunity to find someone or a couple of teachers to really bounce ideas
Right.
off of. We also do, and I forgot to mention, we also hold grade level meetings as well, where we really hone in on what we're seeing in that cohort of children. So, anything else?
I found it interesting that both with your plan and with the Robbins plan, that parents are very much a focus for school improvement. And obviously, we know that you're dealing with families who may have English as a second language in the home, and how much more difficult that makes it. That interesting that we see that on both your plans this year, but wish you well with it, because adults who are uncertain about speaking are often very hesitant to come out and display their lack of knowledge or ability. So
And we do each have a parent liaison translator that we are very thankful for, in more ways than one. They are amazing people, very trusting, and have created trusting relationships with those families. Right before I came here, I had a parent that came in and wanted to talk to me, and it was nice to have Mr. Havner there, right, to be able to support. So I know un poquito.
Thank you, Jenny. And now Marcy Cooper, principal, Southern Middle School, will share her insights and her team's plan and where they're moving forward.
I'd also like to thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did last year. We have a 2-year plan, and what we're doing is basically the same plan, but we have tweaked it. Last year, for our instructional coaches, we pretty much had content specialists. We reinvented what that looked like. We had 4 coaches, 1 in each core content area that taught part of the day and then coached part of the day. And our professional learning community meetings were basically about content, what students needed to know and how we were going to teach it to them. We had a very tight flex schedule last year. That's the 40 minutes of extra time that we have. What we did was we took the students who were in the 9th percentile and lower in math, because we had a lot of them, and we took them from the bottom, and those students had 100 minutes of math daily instead of 60. They met in their classroom twice. We lowered the class size for those classrooms, and they were able to then remediate what they had already done, but then also pre-teach what they were about to learn in that smaller class size every single day for the 100 minutes. Last year, we worked to strengthen our Capturing Kids' Hearts and our PBIS. There wasn't training available for our new staff last year, but we tried our best to train them, and they had their contracts and everything on the walls. And we began the multi-tiered system of support process. And our team built this database for every single student in our school, and we track every single student's data and progress, which is quite the undertaking, but we feel that, and we know that it matters. For this year, it came at about the right time. Our staff had become very well-versed in their content because we were able to retain some staff members. And so when the district changed the format for instructional coaches, we were ready. This year, we're very much more focused on instructional strategies for the different content areas. We, through our MTSS process, are being very in tune to individual student needs, working on interventions, really digging down to determine whether students can't or they won't because they can't, because those are really two different interventions, behavioral or academic. We were recently named a green ribbon school, and I think that is due to us really drilling down to individual student needs. We are also in the process of focusing on the process of PLCs. We are training our different staff members to build capacity of our staff so they know the why and they understand the entire umbrella of what it means to be a professional learning community. We are providing our own BT support through a retired teacher, Becky Oldham. She is there 20 hours a week. And so,
That's beginning
yes,
teachers.
sorry, beginning teachers, not just beginning teachers to the profession, but beginning teachers in our district and in our school. But she is there and able to provide some very consistent reinforcement and support for those teachers. We are triangulating our data. We're using STAR data, which is given to everyone. We're using EOG data, North Carolina check-in data, and then we match that with how students are doing within teacher classes to see if our classes are rigorous enough that it's a reflection of how students are doing. And for students that are having modified material, we're making sure to note that. I already talked about capturing kids' hearts. Let's see, we also pay for an additional guidance counselor. We think it's very important to meet our students' social and emotional needs and have noted that students that have repeating behaviors, if you ask them, what do you need in order to be successful, many times they are very, very, very honest with you. And so we have groups that meet in the library during lunch because the lunchroom is too loud. We have students that go to the media center or the office conference room first thing in the morning because they need that calming presence. We also changed our format of school. So we open our doors at 7 o'clock. When Ms. Brown and I get there, they're able to come in to the common area because many parents work. This allows parents to drop them off on the way to their shift at the hospital. But so that they are able to have the time, and our teachers open their doors at 7:30, rather than having a common meeting place for students and then allowing them to go at 7:45. Our teachers made that commitment to be there so that students can have a quiet beginning to their day. This year, our flex groups are not as tight. They're dependent on our common formative assessments that we're giving. So if students are lacking in a certain skill, they will have 40 minutes with their math teacher or a reading teacher. Right now, we're changing those about every 3 weeks as we go through and assess those common formative assessments. Students that already know the material, they go right now to their science and social studies classes and they're pushed upward with some higher level thinking projects. We're including the writing process in those classes. And I'm very proud of our growth last year because we showed that we are paying attention to the individual children. We made growth in every subgroup from EC to AIG. And I think it's due in part to our focus on individual students and giving them what they need. Any questions?
I just want to commend all of you for the work that you're trying to reach every student in different ways and meet their needs. That says it all to me, because if we can reach all our students, we will show the growth and the achievement that they need to make. Thank you.
Betty, I definitely agree. The commitments, not just for you as leaders, but your team. Having teachers show up, Marcy, to have students to come into their rooms at 7:30 is amazing. And trying to reach not only Jenny and Christine, the students, but the families. And making sure that they're getting what they need so that they can communicate. Every time I show up, there is someone there that can interpret. Just Dante, we just appreciate you guys as leaders and what you're doing within your school system.
And I'd like to make a few comments, and I want to preface the comments I'm going to make by acknowledging that there are really great things happening in our schools. Our employees are dedicated and hardworking. My comments are meant only for the school score achievement and growth. When I compared the school performance achievement and growth scores for our low-performing schools, the ones in 2013-14 and the ones in 18-19, Southern Middle, Southern Middle was the only school that had higher scores in all three areas. The other schools did not show higher scores than any of the three areas. It is our responsibility as a board to provide the programs, services, and resources to ensure improvement. We cannot put that responsibility solely on our individual schools. We need to find out what has proven successful in schools. I want to rephrase that. We cannot put that responsibility solely on our individual schools, our teachers, or our administrators. We need to find out what has proven successful in schools with similar demographics and results, and provide those same program services to our low-performing schools. And they have to have proven success over a 3 to 4 year period. Have we done research to find schools for our low-performing schools anywhere in North Carolina or the United States that have similar characteristics and have shown significant improvement over an extended period of time? We can no longer allow low-performing schools to continue on their present path without giving them what is proven to be successful for similar schools somewhere else. And I would also like to see, when we do our school improvement plans, that we see the results. When you do next year, the next plan, that we see the results, or you review what the results were from the previous plan you had submitted us. But I commend you all for your work, and we need to give you what we know is going to work, not what you're trying, hoping it will give you what you want. We can find out what it really takes for your specific school. I know it's not easy, but those are my thoughts. Thank you.
I'd like to ask Ms. Cooper again one question. And I'm not going to ask Ms. Wiley, because I know you said you are one sixth grade English, one seventh grade English, one eighth grade English. So you deal with your classroom numbers as they're given to you. But Ms. Cooper, since we have now fully put into effect the K through 3 class size mandates, what are you seeing with your class sizes at Southern Middle? And I maybe should ask you other folks too, with third, fourth, and fifth, with fourth and fifth grade. How are you seeing those much larger class sizes come into play and affecting the programs as you're able to implement them?
They're there. Our sixth grade, well, in our sixth grade, partly due to, we had many more students come this year than we expected, which is a good problem to have. We had kids come from private school, charter school, homeschool, different public schools, so that's great. But our sixth grade right now are sitting at 32, 33. We had planned for our seventh grade classes to be smaller. We didn't expect for them to be that much smaller, but our seventh grade are 25, 26, 27, and then eighth grade pops back up to 30, 31, 32. The hard part about that is sixth grade. We enrolled 7 students last week, and 6 were sixth graders, of course.
Wow, at this point in the year.
At this point, so.
You want to add to that? Did you see?
Yeah, my fifth grade classes are averaging 30. My fourth grade classes are averaging about 28. But again, last week I enrolled 4 more students. They're coming. The enrollment is up. We're sending the right messages. I think we're doing the right things with kids and families, and people are starting to talk about it. But it creates an interesting challenge for us to figure out what to do about those classes.
We're seeing the impact of fewer locally funded teachers. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions before we finish the presentation?
We're going to let you finish the presentation.
Well, again, I'm a little bit in awe too, as I listen to these principals share what they're doing in their schools, what they're working with their teams on. And our jobs in central services is to do the best we can to magnify that work and to magnify the impact of that work through our support and through creating tiered support plans and making sure we're leveraging everything we can to help them. And that's really the gist of what we should be doing to support these schools. And so we're going to continue in our central services plan of support to provide professional learning around what is effective school improvement. We've invested in that, and we know that is what works. When you have a great school improvement plan and a team, and you work that plan, good things happen. Our entire team, not just curriculum and instruction, but our entire academics and student support services team will continue to look at how we can support these schools, and Bridget's going to talk a little bit about that from the tiered support plan and the district coach role. But that's not just curriculum instruction, that's exceptional children, that's student support services, that's plan accountability and research, that's technology, that's all of our departments, Title I, federal programs, et cetera. How can we support these schools and be talking about it? Bridget's going to go into a little more detail on tiered support plans and what those are. And something we've talked a lot about as a team is this idea of a district level coach and bringing that to life and making sure we're doing that with fidelity. We're offering targeted support through a district level coach as well. So I'm going to let Bridget talk about those two things real quick, and then we'll sum things up. Yes, sir.
May I ask, as you go through this plan, to identify items that are new, as opposed to what you've done in the past?
Yes, sir.
Just to kind of give us a feel for how we're evolving.
Yes, sir. I would say that the tiered support plans, this is the second year we've tried to evolve those, make those deeper. Bridget can hit on that a little bit. And the idea of the district level coach, while we've talked about having that, we haven't lived it with fidelity. And so that is something that we're differentiating, doing differently this year, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Great question, Mr. Weaver. Thank you.
So thank you so much. I have the awesome opportunity to work very closely with each of these 4 principals. Throughout the course of the last couple of months, we've met with them. I've brought the curriculum and instruction team with me to review their school improvement plan and to make a tiered support plan. So we start, I think it's important to note that we start with the school improvement plan. We're not making a whole separate plan. They've already done a comprehensive needs assessment that outlines their needs. And so our team's job is to come in and say, so how can we support you further with this school improvement plan that you've made that's so targeted to your needs? So we come in, we have very open conversation about the needs of the school, of the teachers, of the students, of the families, and we write this tiered support plan that outlines those needs and outlines how each of the content specialists can come in, and it's very clear how each of the content specialists can come in and support. Now, it looks different in each of the 4 schools because they are 4 different sizes, they're 4 different demographics, they have 4 very different sets of needs, and so what the content specialists are providing is very different. For Marcy's setting, they're coming in and unpacking standards, and they're helping them build common formative assessments because that's where they are in the PLC process. For Dante's, it's more, and for Christine's, it's more in the classroom. It's side by side with teachers, coaching and supporting. So wherever that school improvement team and that principal says that we're needed, that's how we're supporting them. And it's typically on a weekly to biweekly basis that our folks are in those buildings. It mentions their coaching cycle for teachers that are new or who may need some extensive support. That's something else that our content specialists are able to provide. We also increase our professional development opportunities as requested by the principal. So if the principal says, I would really like for you to hit on higher order thinking skills, and how to incorporate those into the classroom. Then our content specialists build that professional development, and they will give that as requested by the principal. And all the requests we've had, like I said, are aligned very strategically with our school improvement plan, which is aligned very closely with our district strategic plan. The district coach, as Dr. Locklear said, we have talked about this, but we haven't necessarily lived it, and we are excited to live this out this year. I am the district coach for Marcy and for Dante, and Miss Heather Stewart is our coach for Jenny and for Christine. And so what that means is that we're meeting monthly, at least monthly, to discuss and monitor the plan that I just mentioned, to go through it step by step and make sure that we are doing what we said we were going to do, and to tweak it if necessary. If we come across a new need, we might add that to the plan. We're doing instructional walkthroughs. The focus of those walkthroughs is determined by the principal. So the principal might say, we just had a great professional development a couple weeks ago on higher order thinking skills, going to go back to that. Can we look for that being incorporated in our walkthrough today? And so those walks are looking for what it is that the principal determines is needed and is aligned with the school improvement plan. Also, you got a glimpse of the NC Star, that online portal where our school improvement plans are housed. That portal allows us to provide coaching comments, so we can go in and make comments as they update the plan. We as district coaches can come in behind and give kudos where needed, or give some thought-provoking ideas about have you thought about trying XYZ, to kind of move that plan along and to keep it a living document. So that's another role of the district coach. Also, the coach attends to the professional development needs of the administrator. Our administrators need professional development just like our teachers do. And you have 4 awesome leaders, but they have 4 different needs. And so that's the role of the coach, is to figure out what does the principal need and how can we maybe in-house provide that professional development, or maybe even look for it elsewhere if it's something that we're not quite sure about providing in-house. And then finally, the coaches will work with the district improvement facilitation team. That team meets regularly to review where are we with our low-performing schools. What are we doing? What supports are we providing? What more could we do? We want to make sure that we're very intentional about what we're providing, and that it's aligned to what these schools need and what their school improvement plans have outlined. So that team will meet regularly and pull together the directors that need to be pulled in, pull in the resources that need to be pulled in, so that they're getting exactly what they need.
And I want to piggyback on that last comment. We talked about as a team, and Mr. Weaver, this is one of the new things, if you wanted to say this is something we're doing differently this year, is really empowering these district coaches, Bridget and Heather, to come back to our big academics and student support services team, the directors and assistant directors, every week, and talk about our low-performing schools. And it may be that Bridget identifies that at Aberdeen, or at Elise, that we need this director, we need Kate, we need Kim, we need Director Parr, Director of Substitute Education. We need to have a meeting after the meeting to talk specifically about a need at Robbins or at Elise. And how do we attack this problem or this need that they have, and how do we put some action steps in to move forward? And that's something that we've empowered the coaches this year. We won't bring this to life and work with fidelity. This is one of the major things that we're really trying to push and do differently this year. And so that's important. That's something we're excited about moving forward. Just some quick highlights on target allocation of resources. What resources are we able to push towards our low-performing schools? Our federal Title I funding is allotted to all of our schools. That's 40% higher free reduced lunch populations. Each of our low-performing schools is also a federal Title I school, and they receive our highest per pupil funding allotment. So our low-performing schools get the highest amount of funding from our Title I federal funds. This provides, as Dr. Wells-Brown mentioned earlier, the instructional coaches at all our low-performing schools. Our schools, as you heard from the principals, they utilize these resources for various things like STEM teachers, reading intervention teachers, and as Marcy talked about, an additional counselor at her school. We also push some local resources into our low-performing schools. Local funding is utilized to provide a full-time assistant principal at our Aberdeen Elementary and at Aberdeen Primary, and also at Southern Middle School. Dante mentioned it earlier, Aberdeen Elementary and Aberdeen Primary received a whole staff reconnect for resilience training, which is about working with those students and their challenges and trauma and having resilience strategies to help those students and, as he mentioned, staff. Southern Middle School, as Marcy's talked about, received funding to be our whole school district pilot for capturing kids' heart. And we are prioritizing our own time. And that's something we're really trying to hold ourselves accountable for, is our team's time, our human capital time, to go towards our low-performing schools. And we're really wanting our principals to hold us accountable to that, and we hold each other accountable to that as we move forward this school year. So moving forward, we want to make sure that we're implementing these strategies with fidelity, that the tiered support plans, we're going to continue to be looking at those, and we're going to be having that mutual accountability back and forth. The district level coaching, which is differentiated this year, is different this year. And I think your question matches this one too, Mr. Weaver. We've got to push ourselves to look at how can we use our current resources, as scarce as they might be, how can we use those differently to impact these schools and their performance? Sometimes that is robbing Peter to pay Paul, as the saying goes. And that's a difficult position to be in, but we've got to continue to analyze what we're using our resources for and how might we use them differently to impact student outcomes. And that's something that we're pushing ourselves further this year than we have in the past. We're always looking for opportunities, whether it be grant opportunities, partnership opportunities, or looking at the state for ability for flexibility. How can we have flexibility in how we use resources? We're always looking at that. And we appreciate the community's advocacy. Ms. Carter, Board Member Carter, you mentioned this, and your continued advocacy for local resources, for lower class size, and to help us have additional instructional support for all of our schools, but certainly our most challenged schools. Before I move on to the last slide, which is about that posting the portal and getting public input and your endorsement of that, any questions for the district level team?
I do have one question. I was really excited to see the level of family engagement that were in some of the schools' plans. What kinds of things can the district do to support family engagement, or is that really a school level and a building level activity?
Well, some of that federal funding is used to provide, like the parental liaisons that Jenny and Christine were talking about, but we can also engage with other areas of the central services, whether it be communications, whether it be like at Southern, where Kate, I think, helped with a parent night, with helping parents understand how to get into Power Schools and Parent Portal. It might be a night that we might do specifically for exceptional children, and Dr. Bullard and her team come in and help. So we're here to access our services and our expertise to help in those ways. But federal funding is used to help support, and each Title I school is required to actually have a parent engagement piece. Certainly our low-performance schools are doing a great job of that.
Thank you.
Tim, very quickly.
Tim, very quickly, or any of the principals, Mr. Dennison's comment about benchmarking against other schools that have similar demographics and similar performance. There has been some of that.
Yes, sir.
To the extent that low-performing schools have had experiences with that. Just
I know
comment on that.
Marcy might could speak to that a little bit. I believe, Marcy, you and your staff have looked at some other schools.
We did. We went 2 years ago to a school in Cabarrus County that had, they were very much like our demographics, and to go and see what they were doing. Some of our ideas about our MTSS database came out of that visit that we did. Can I add? Yes, and we're going on the 12th to Richmond County to go over and see what they're doing as part of their process for what they do after check-ins, to really dig down into the data.
The tiered support plan for, the district, I've requested personally to go to schools. I want to get in there. I went to the dual language conference last year and paid a little extra money to go into Albuquerque to a school just like Elise, to really see not only the dual language program, but also just to see what was going on and how were they performing and what were they doing, and then taking those ideas back. So finding those schools and getting there that's key to me, so.
And then one of the things that we did spend last year is we visited several A-plus schools across the state because we knew that A-plus was one of the schools, one of the programs that even the state was recommending for turnaround and transforming schools. And so we wanted to go see what that was, and we've spent some time going to visit those schools so we could see what it was like.
Yeah, I would add that we visited A-plus schools, we visited dual immersion programs, we visited global,
Yeah.
schools with a global focus.
Mhm.
So we did a series of visits throughout last fall and last spring, and that is, like Jenny took the words out of my mouth, that part of a tiered support plan is, they've been asking to see different programs, and so those are in the works.
That's good. And I think it's important when you look at these schools and find, it has to be the same demographics. And you can't, I've seen this happen in education too many times. You can't piecemeal what they're doing. You have to duplicate everything they're doing, not this program or that program, if you want to get the same results. And I know, schools all over the place are trying new stuff, but somebody somewhere has proven it works for 3 or 4 years, and you need to duplicate exactly what they're doing. And I know they're not easy to find. But again, I certainly appreciate your hard work, because I know we're doing everything we can, but it's our responsibility as a board. If you see things at those schools and you know what works, it's our responsibility to make sure you provided the resources and services that you need to get it done somehow. And I'll just make a comment on the 80-20% for the school performance score. The State Board of Education will have to present to the legislature by February the 20th or 15th a recommendation on how to split up between growth and achievement. And I'm pushing hard with them, and I've talked to communicated with all the school board members there and the chair and the vice chair that 50-50 is a win-win situation, because that not only will help you in showing exactly what's happening in your schools, but it will force the schools that already have high achievement scores to have to improve to maintain the achievement scores they have. So, thank you.
I'm glad to see that you're looking at instructional areas and not trying to teach to the test. As a former educator, having been doused with some of that along the way, it's rewarding to see that we are concentrating again on our instruction, our students, our community, and our teams to help it work that way. And I want you to please continue doing that and not trying to, I want our students to be able to think and reason and be problem solvers, as you've all said in your school improvement plans. So please continue that.
When you say A-plus school, what do you mean by that? I'm still learning.
I can add to that. So
Okay,
A+ is an arts integration program. And so it starts, what Dante and I love about it is that it starts with the standards. It starts with the standards that teachers are already expected to teach and students are expected to learn. And then it looks at where do the arts naturally integrate to make it an engaging lesson. So it really, although it's arts focused, it's really about engagement. What does engaging instruction look like? And not only that, but engaging instruction that's aligned to the standards. So we've been very, very impressed with everything we've attended, and we're excited about this potential.
Thank you.
Sure.
If I could just add for the record, Robbins's Dual Language Academy program resulted from a trip that Dr. Kim Bullard and members of the Robbins staff made back in 14-15 and came back with that. So that very highly successful program, which is certainly one of the shining stars of our entire school district, came out of just that kind of an experience. Dr. Metcalf, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to thank Mr. Dennison for his work on the formula. Across the state of North Carolina, 95% of the schools that received a D or an F work with high poverty populations. And almost 87% of the schools that got an A or a B do not work with a high population of poverty. There's a problem with the formula as well.
Information that absolutely cannot be ignored. There are a lot that want to ignore it, but it cannot be ignored.
Sir.
So we're looking for that 10 to 15% that are knocking it out of the park, but what we often find is they can't sustain it
Sure,
Mr.
that
Dennison, you said you
10% are
need to see
getting
it over a
C.
3 to 4 year period of time. That really narrows down the
Oh, yeah,
possibilities. You're down to very, very few that are left, so thank you.
But it'd be nice to know if you did exactly what they did, you'd get the same results if everything else is the same.
Yes.
It's always nice to know what to do.
Still got a lot of business to
As good as you
cover.
wanna be.
Getting late. Got a lot of business to cover. Dr. Locklear, how about closing us here?
The superintendent would ask for your endorsement to allow us to put these low-performing plans out for the public to view. And a website portal will be open for the public and the community to provide feedback from November 13th after your potential approval on the 12th through November 26th. We'll bring back a summary of that feedback on December 2nd, and then the final recommended plan for your potential approval. So that would be our request for your endorsement.
I really appreciate all the effort that went into this presentation and giving us a glimpse of what's happening inside of each of your schools. I read something over the weekend in the News and Observer that I wanted to read to you all. It was actually on the opinion section about Read to Achieve. But the very last sentence I thought was very important for us to remember, that improving schools is often difficult, regularly frustrating, and never something we should abandon. And I thought this writer just nailed it, that there is no silver bullet. We want there to be one, and there isn't. But it takes the dedication of staff like you, who are leading your school teams, to really dig in and see what it is that's going to work for your kids and find those solutions. So just don't give up, and let us know how we can help you.
Let me just get your picture while you're right there. That's good. We're impressed.
I just like to make one other comment. When you're looking for schools, don't depend on doing it by yourself. There have to be people at DPI or somewhere that can look at your school and knows a lot about other schools. They can really help you there. I mean, it's not your job. Somebody should be able to tell you that.
All right, thank you. I think we're going to take a 5-minute break. Sound good?
Can I put y'all?
Call the meeting back to order. Dr. Grimacy.
As you can see, Madam Chair, Mr. Cox is ready with our original budget resolution for fiscal year 1920. We have to do this. It is a challenge not having a state budget, but he's going to do the best he can because we've just simply run out of time. So, Mr. Cox, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Grimacy, Madam Chair, other members of the board. I'm going to ask Laura to just scroll through what the document you're seeing here is the actual budget resolution, but if she'll go to the presentation, we'll talk about what's actually in that resolution document. Sorry. See, out here on the island by yourself, you have to do it all. So as Dr. Grimacy said, final budget from the state has not been passed yet, has not been approved. So all districts are working under the state continuing resolution. The budget here is based on preliminary information that the Department of Public Instruction has given us. We know that this information will change once a budget is passed, whenever that may be. But like Dr. Grimacy also said, we've got to put a budget together and bring a resolution to you so we can move forward. So this is the original budget resolution.
Hey, Andrew, if I could, just to help you out, one point that I'd like to make is that what is important about the original budget resolution is its difference from the preliminary budget approved by the school board. And even though we don't have a state budget, we know more now than we did then. And so there will be some improvements on the information we know based on what you know from DPI.
Correct.
That's right.
Yes.
Different way of saying the same thing.
Right. Okay, so in state funding, we are, the department has projected we'll receive $76,997,891. And local expenses, the commissioners did approve $31,569,133. To break that down, that's $1,589,133 more than the commissioners gave us last year, which is combined with $850,000. And then the one-time $739,133 for the opening of Deeds Creek. Our federal funding, right now, that is the projected information that the department has given us, of almost $6.5 million. It does not include carryover because those monies have not been approved and given back to us from the department yet. So just want to make note of that. In Fund 4, our capital expense, it is made up of the $750,000 that the county gives us in recurring, and then also there is $339,596 that was appropriated to us in 17-18 for the construction of the new schools. I believe that's what it was, that is still being spent, remaining fund balance for that.
Are you, isn't that carry, we don't have Mr. Barath
It's
here.
it's carryover.
It's carryover
Yeah,
in
they
local
gave
capital.
$2.1 million back in 17-18. That $339,000 is left that has not been spent for that funding at this point.
I
So
think
it is
that's accrued
carryover.
local capital, is it not?
It is in local capital, yes, we're in
Yeah,
Fund
thank
4,
you.
we're talking about
Okay.
in Fund
No,
4 right now.
it's accrued local
Yes.
capital, it hasn't been spent.
Okay.
Because much of which we're holding back as we get through the construction process.
Okay. So that makes up the $1,089,596. In the school nutrition fund, we're anticipating $5,485,000 from the child nutrition program. And then our local operations, which is our Fund 8, which consists of Medicaid funding, which we have the bridge funding, driver's ed, our ROTC programs, things that we get grant funding for, or programs that charter schools don't have. Different reimbursements go in that fund, and we're anticipating.
Federal impact aid.
Yes, federal impact aid is
and
another one,
Army
yes.
Youth Program and our neighborhood program.
Yes. At $3.1 million. So a total original budget is $124,746,970, which is an increase of 1.7 million over the 2018-19 original budget. So just to talk a little bit, which I've already mentioned these, so I won't go too much more in depth with that. The county did give us $32,589,133, which was an increase of $1.5,089,133, which was the $850,739,133.
So the 739 will not be reoccurring.
It is a one-time, what they have told us is a one-time funding stream, yes. So what makes up that fund, the total local expense fund is $31,089,133 from the county. There's $450,000 in fines and forfeitures that we anticipate getting. And then interest on funds that we have, about $30,000, which makes up that total local Fund 2 expense of $31,569,133.
We've made this statement before, it bears repeating. The 450,000 and the 30,000 are pretty much placeholders based on historical averages.
Yes, that is
And
correct.
So they vary greatly from year to year, but those are probably as good a numbers to use, and there's no real science to that other than that.
Right.
You don't want to budget too much if you don't have it.
I would prefer to budget low and be surprised and get more than under budget, over budget and not have that revenue and have to figure out what to do at that point.
Those numbers also can affect fund balance surplus at the end of the year. A variation of $250,000 in fines and forfeitures can affect your fund balance surplus,
Yes, absolutely.
one way or the other.
Absolutely. So just kind of a summary of what's included in the budget. On the state side, as I mentioned, it is based on the state continuation budget. We do know that the budget will change once the state budget is approved. It is an increase of the overall total budget, $1.7 million. It does include additional program enhancement teachers that the state has given us. It does continue, like Dr. Powers mentioned, it does continue the SRO grant funding. There are no pay increases for any staff at this point because the budget has not been passed and we're operating under the continuing resolution. There have been increased benefit rates that we're responsible for at this point, but yet the state has not given us that funding at this point. They will. We just have not received it yet. So that's a thing that our fund balance covers, like we mentioned last month.
And hopefully we'll get reimbursed for that. Yeah.
Yes, hopefully we will get reimbursed, and I'm pretty certain we will for those benefit rate increases once DPI finishes going through all the things that have happened before July 1, because they've been waiting to scramble, waiting for a budget to pass so they can allot things out to us. Since it hasn't happened, they've started allotting preliminary things out to us, and they have not done anything that has happened after July 1, which those benefit rate increases were done in many bills after July 1.
So the benefit rates we have to fund with no money from the state, but the raises we don't have to fund until the budget is approved.
So the rate increases, the benefit rate increases have been passed and signed into law by the governor in a mini budget bill. They are different than the hospitalization rate is the same that is what was in the appropriations bill that he vetoed. The retirement rate is different in that bill that he vetoed than what he signed in a mini bill.
Okay.
So those are into law. The teacher raises have not been signed into law, and I won't get into it right now, but they are, he has two bills on his desk right now related to teacher and school employee raises.
Okay.
So we do have the benefit rate increases with no funding at this point. We will get that funding, we just don't have it at this point. One other thing related to state funding, we do not have state mental health funding. They did pass another bill that we will get later on for that, but right now, the original budget resolution does not include that because we have not been given that by the state. A few things that the local budget does include is 2 additional teachers that we requested from the county. They provided funding for. And this is, not counteractive, it goes against that first slide about salary benefit rate increases. This is the anticipated increases that were in that budget that we requested from the county. So they did give us that funding for those anticipated raises that haven't happened yet, but this budget does include those on the local side. And then there's increased charter flow through money that we have to give to the charter schools or additional enrollments at the charter school. And then a key point is that there is no local fund balance used for this original budget resolution. And then one other thing I want to mention about fund balance, just to update the board based on the preliminary numbers from our financial statements, year ending June 30, 2019, our fund balance is $2.1 million, which gives us $100,000 above what our minimum required fund balance is to meet our needs of deferred costs for the federal monies that we don't get until federal government gives us our budget, and things just like the benefit rate increases that we don't have funding for at this point.
And by comparison, what was that surplus last year?
It was approximately $2.9 million at the end of last year.
Just under 2.9 million.
You know, we are appreciative to the commissioners for what funding they do give us, and I look forward to developing a relationship with them and working to increase the funding that they provide to the district. I'm happy to take any questions or.
Again, to emphasize, the document that the board is actually considering, the PowerPoint is a summary of the
Right.
budget document itself. So we're happy to take any questions on the budget document or the presentation.
Just
Yes.
have a question about the fund balance real quick. I know we have said 2 million, but we've also said 2%. And as our budget has grown because we're paying more in salaries and benefits, if I look at 2% of 124,000, I just did that, we would be at almost 2.5 million that we should have in our fund balance. So what, I mean, I know you would probably want it, you know, a lot higher than that, but are we looking at 2% or are we looking at 2 million? What is that magic number?
So based on the prior budget resolutions, it's been recommended around 2 million. 2%, like you're saying, is more than 2 million. 2 million right now will cover our federal delays and unexpected things like the salary benefit increases. Yes, I would like to have more. I would like to have at least 2%. And ideally, I would like to have 2 months of local operating, which will be between $4 and $5 million.
Madam Chair, to be clear, being the superintendent on whom the responsibility fell to break the school district's dependence on spending from its fund balance, the best that we could negotiate with the county was $2 million, not a percentage.
Oh, it wasn't a percentage.
So it's a
okay.
flat $2 million at cash balance. So it is not intended to cover any period of time where you have to operate for a period of time. It is merely to cover a historical estimate of the worst-case scenario where we had a delay in our federal funding, which reached, there was a year that Mr. Griffin told us was like, it got over $800,000. We were awaiting federal reimbursements. And so what we basically did is we looked at $1 million and doubled that for a worst-case scenario that would exceed that. So that cash fund balance is an absolute $2 million cutoff, nothing more. There's no formula to it. It's just $2 million.
And I believe this is the second year in a row that we have not appropriated any fund balance in our original budget. Is that right?
That is correct. We did not appropriate anything
good.
out of fund balance last year. Right. But nevertheless, we needed, there was approximately $700,000 that was needed because of variation. So when you're dealing with less than 1%, it really gets to be exciting.
That's a word for it.
When you've got a less than a 1% margin of error. Most statisticians tell you need to have a 3% margin of error when you're doing survey work with Gallup. But nevertheless, we've got 1%, and we've done very well being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars in that respect.
And so with us being November, is there any ideas? I mean, I know the budget is still back and forth and stalled. Is there any ideas that you're getting from anybody or communication on when we possibly could have a budget passed?
Well, the General Assembly has gone home. They'll be back, is it December? I think it's later in
wow.
November, to take up a couple items, but they say they will not take up any veto override or vote on that until they come back in January.
Oh, wow.
So I don't see, an end in sight. I could be surprised. I hope I am surprised. But we're not hearing anything. And we're hearing that likely the governor will veto the salary bill, one of the salary bills that's on his desk. Not sure about the other one that relates to principals and step increases for teachers, but we're hearing that he most likely will veto the one that gives the teacher raises and the non-certified raises.
When it is passed, will it pay in arrears?
So, the way everything that I've seen, even in the mini bills, it says effective July 1. So, to me, that is, yes, it will be retroactive back to July 1.
That remains our hope.
Yes.
Any other questions about the budget resolution? Thank you, Mr. Cox.
And Mr. Cox will remain for presentation of the proposed budget calendar for the coming months. Board members, I will note that in putting the agenda together, the staff was sort of presuming that these last items were quite routine and quick. So I'm just saying. We didn't get any emails in advance on these, so we're sort of assuming that you're thinking the same way. Mr. Cox?
So, yes, this is the proposed budget calendar for the development of the FY 21, which is the 2020-2021 budget. We built off of last year, well, partially off of last year's information. We'd like to break up the budget into two sessions at the one partially work session in January and partial work session in February, to break it up a little bit.
I would characterize that as budget preparation reports. So the information we provide to the board that prepares them for the budget, rather than
Correct.
have an all-day session at the Board of Elections, we're looking at those reports we can provide to you in January, those reports we can provide to you in February, maybe extend those sessions a little bit and not have an all-day session in between. But otherwise, this schedule is pretty much the same as last year. We just changed the dates.
It is. We confirm with the county, they're having their county work session January 15th. They confirmed that we can present April 21st to them, and they have confirmed that the public hearing and final budget approval will be on June 16th.
Is it February 10th? Or, I'm sorry, February 3rd, not February 6th? I didn't catch that earlier when I was reviewing it. It's a Monday is our work session, correct? If you could just check that for next week when we vote on it.
Yes, thank you.
Is that a typo?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we have found very consistently last year and in previous years, the projected revenue that the county manager presents on January 15th is a very established number. There's very little variation that occurs, and so we're going to move forward with our budget on the assumption that unless something changes, whatever number that the county manager presents on January 15th is as solid as the number that he will present on June 2nd. So rather than assume that there's going to be some openness between January 15th and January 2nd, we're not going to make that assumption this year because consistently that number is very stable, with the exception of one year where there was some one-time only money provided out of the fund balance I would say that very consistently what we see at the winter work session in January is very consistent with what we'll end up with. So whatever that number is, we're going to build the budget this year on that assumption, and we'll present what the needs of the school district are over a 5-year period of time, but nevertheless, the actual budget itself will be built on that number, and then if that changes, that changes. We'll have things that we can consider for that. Any questions on the budget calendar? Okay, then thank you, Mr. Cox. At this time, I'll invite Dr. Bullard to come forward.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members, and Dr. Grimacy. I am requesting approval on one contract related to services that are needed for the Exceptional Children's Department. The contract being presented for your approval is with Soliant Health Incorporated. The contract with Soliant Health provides services for Moore County school students who need visual impaired teacher services. The cost of the services will be billed at $80 per hour and will not exceed $75,000. Soliant will provide teletherapy sessions for our visually impaired students. This is a contract that we have had previously in the 2017-18 school year but did not have last year. Last school year, we were able to hire a Moore County Schools employee to provide these services. This contract is also being presented for approval that has not had an increase from the 2017-18 school year cost. There are 17 students in our school system that receive VI services in 7 different schools. Are there any questions?
No questions.
And so for these type dollars, remind me, Dr. Grimacy, how are they allocated? I mean, what piece of the pie? I'm sorry.
The EC department will be paying for these services through money received from grants and monies received from the state.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
How did I do? Thank you, Dr. Bullard. Mr. Weaver, did you have a question?
That was the question.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Bullard. Dr. Powers will take us home with items E, F, and G.
Just remember, Seth, we have dinner coming up.
Got it. I will be as fast as possible. Take us home. All right. All right, so the first item I have to bring to you is the community response to the proposed name of the new Northmore High School wing. So, as you know, you approved us to seek community feedback at the October 14th meeting, so we did that. We had an online portal. Also had a community forum meeting at Northmore High School. The portal was open October 15th to the 22nd. The community meeting was held on October 22nd. The survey outcomes were decisive. Of the 96 people who provided a response to the online survey, 90% indicated their support of the proposal. 10 respondents expressed opposition, and there was no viable alternative naming options suggested. 7 of the 10 no responses on the survey occurred on the same date within 8 seconds of each other. Just thought we'd point that out. Support for the proposal was also confirmed during the October 22nd community forum at Northmore. 8 community members in attendance. The meeting began with a letter from Mr. Gilmore being read, suggesting or proposing the naming of the science wing. Everyone there expressed their support. 5 people in attendance spoke in support. Everyone raised their hand in support. No one spoke in opposition. So based on that input, Dr. Grimsey will forward a recommendation to the board on November 12th.
It is my intention, unless the board gives me a good reason why not to. Thank you, Dr. Powers. Madam Chair, with your permission?
Yes, please.
Continue, Dr. Powers.
Okay. We have another proposal to designate, this time the Media Center at the new Southern Pines Elementary School as the Bruce Cunningham Media Center. This request to Dr. Grimacy was received from Ms. Jen Ray, community member, and it was also sent on behalf of 18 other community supporters and the Moore County Literacy Council. And again, to name the new Southern Pines Elementary Media Center in memory of Mr. Bruce Cunningham. This request does meet the standards for school board consideration established by Policy 7550, naming facilities. Mr. Cunningham moved to Moore County in 1973 and was a staunch supporter of the community and Moore County schools. He spent 45 years as both a respected attorney and community leader. He was a key figure in the creation of the Tour de Moore bicycle race and the restoration of the Sunrise Theater in Southern Pines. When his daughters were students at Southern Pines Primary School, he and his wife Ann raised money and were involved in construction of a new state-of-the-art playground at the school. He later became heavily involved in volunteering his time to coach and judge the Pinecrest High School speech and debate team. In 2004, Mr. Cunningham was elected to the Moore County Board of Education, where he served tirelessly to represent the interests of students, staff, and families of Moore County until his passing on July 5th, 2019. He also served as board chair from 2014 to 2016. Some of his personal accolades include being co-founder of the Tour de Moore and serving as the event director for 34 years, as well as chairing the initial Sunrise Theater Preservation Group in 1998. In 2011, the North Carolina State Bar Association presented Mr. Cunningham with a John B. McMillan Distinguished Service Award for his work and many volunteer roles. The Kiwanis Club of the Sandhills honored him with its Builders Cup Award in 2017, and the Moore County Community Foundation recognized him as its Man of the Year in 2018. After his death, he was honored in the North Carolina House of Representatives with a resolution from State Representative Jamie Bowles. Mr. Bowles described Mr. Cunningham as a great servant and supporter of the community and education. Mr. Cunningham's service to Moore County schools warrants further study of community support for this request. Therefore, the superintendent will request the school board's authorization to seek community input regarding this proposal. The superintendent's designee will invite community stakeholders to submit their input by letters, which can be mailed to Tanya Wagner, principal of Southern Pines Elementary, through an online portal, or during a community forum, which will be conducted on Tuesday, November 19th at 6 p.m. in the Southern Pines Elementary School Media Center. The findings will then be reported back to the school board during the December 2nd board work session.
And so we're just seeking endorsement to go to the public to seek input.
Correct.
Board members, any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I'm glad to see this. Bruce was one of the first people that I got involved with when I came to the area. He was in my Kiwanis Club that I joined, and I worked with him on the Tour de Moore, and he was a very valuable member of the community, and I'm glad to see it.
Sir?
I have to say, this is a little bittersweet to see both of these agenda items here today, and it's, I know we've talked about it before, and it's a little hard to talk about it again, but I'm just honored to have known both of them and to think about a way that we can see their names and live on in some of our schools in a small way. So thank you for bringing both of these to us.
Absolutely.
Ready for field trips?
Yes.
Dr.
Are
Powers?
we going?
You know, well, yes, you might. Be careful what you wish for.
We have 5 field trips for your consideration. The first is Union Pines High School is requesting that their choral students be allowed to travel to Kennesaw State University just outside of Atlanta for a master class choral experience with a professor there. They would also see sites and areas of interest around Atlanta as a part of that trip, and the trip is planned for April 17th through 19th. I have 2 from Southern Middle School, both requests to go to Williamsburg, Virginia, one by the 8th grade orchestra students, second by 8th grade band students. They would be traveling to participate in that competition on separate dates. The orchestra students on May 15th through 16th, and the band students on April 18th through 19th. Cranes Creek Middle School is also requesting to travel to Williamsburg for band, orchestra, and chorus competition as well, and their trip would be planned for the May 15th through 17th date. And finally, Elise Middle School is requesting that 7th grade students be allowed to travel to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina to visit Medieval Times Dinner and Tournament. The students study feudalism systems and what life was like during the Middle Ages as a part of the 7th grade social studies curriculum, and this trip will allow for those students to experience what life was like, and that also relates to classroom activities that they'll be doing in both social studies and ELA compared to with compare and contrast writing activities. That trip is on March 13th.
Any questions?
Thank you, board members. Thank you, Dr. Powers. Madam Chair, the staff awaits the board's direction on your desire for board action and consent action during your meeting on Tuesday, November 12th.
So we are looking at the items between 3A and 3G, which ones we should pull out for action. I do want to say that I talked to Ms. Carter before she left. She would like to suggest that item A be pulled out for board action. I would also suggest that we pull out item E for board action.
I agree.
Do we traditionally pull out the budget resolution or no?
I don't think so. I think it's
I don't think
traditionally
so.
on consent.
That's what I thought. Should everything else stay on consent?
Yep.
Sounds good to me.
So
Sounds
A and
good.
E.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Potter, you got that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are there any board comments this evening?
I had a question. Will you talk to Jen Ray at all? Or is that for the online portal for Bruce?
Not necessarily,
Or,
not
I'm
for the
sorry,
online.
for the,
I'm confident she'll be at the meeting.
well, we won't be able to go. So, we're gonna be at the, conference. So I just want someone to let them know that we can't go because of
Oh,
that.
I see.
Well,
Yeah.
and I will be there, and I'm sure, as again, Jen will as well. I'll share that.
Can you, yeah, thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Caldwell. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Very good point.
Any comments from board members tonight?
A lot of good work.
And I just want to say that we had an exciting weekend, and I can't even list everything that the Moore County schools did, but athletics, arts, band, theater, fantastic. If you want to know what happened, go to Mr. Dennison's Facebook page, and you will. It's all there. But just
I think it's worth mentioning, the two theater teams, I don't know how many years running, only Moore County is represented at the state North Carolina theater competition, and that's Union Pines and
Northmore.
this year.
And then Pinecrest got grand champion at the Lee County
No,
band
Union
competition.
Pines?
Union Pines did, excuse me, Union Pines did. And then.
But all three bands won in their categories.
And all three bands, keep going. I mean,
Well,
you said you couldn't name them all.
Well, there
but-
was soccer, football, volleyball, there was just a lot happening in Moore County, and I just want to
And Miss-
congratulate all the fall sports and all the fall activities
And
for
Mr.
their.
Weaver and Mr. Dennison and I and Dr. Grimacy attended the first performance of a marching band to perform for DPI on Wednesday, and had wonderful support from parents and from the legislators and our DPI people coming out, even in the misting rain. So it was a wonderful time.
I made an interesting comment of the drama, the play festival. Kimberly had guys that left to go to the football game Friday night, and band left to go to the football game Friday night. And then Saturday morning, they had a performance, and after performance, a lot of the members left that were in the band to go to Lee County. It's sort of amazing what's happening at Northmore with all the different students involved in so many things.
Very well-rounded.
Let me clarify, was it Union Pines or Pinecrest that got grand champion in Lee County?
Union Pines.
You're sure?
Yes.
I don't know.
Union Pines did, okay, just want to be clear on that. We got to make sure we're accurate.
Yes.
Just to make sure we're accurate. I was out of town, so I missed it.
Oh, and the one that got the outstanding actor performance was Josiah, who played a dog in their play, Push and Pull.
Was that Northmore?
Yeah, Northmore.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well done, thank you, Madam Chairman.
All right.
Move be adjourned?
Second.
First by Ed, a second by, I'll give it to Dr. Brown. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, one and all.
And it's Tuesday, right?